When you talk about the greatest manga of all time, the discussion begins and ends with Berserk. Not only is it a series that is 30 years in the making, but it also has a diverse cast of fleshed out characters, a plot with numerous twists and turns, and to top things off, some of the most gorgeously detailed manga panels ever drawn, period. As a brief disclaimer, this video will be recapping the major events of the Berserk universe in chronological order, which means the information will be presented in a different order from the manga release. But without further ado, let's begin our long, albeit exciting journey. Around 1,000 years ago, there was an era of conflict. Various tribes fought constantly in the midst of growing epidemics. All the while, the population was severely reduced, until a man, known as King Gaiseric, came along and united the surrounding countries to establish peace for the continent. Of course, with any kingdom, there are those who oppose the ruling order. One person in particular was a sage that Gaiseric locked up in the Conviction Tower, where he was subjugated to every kind of torture known to man, until 4 or possibly 5 angels came to the rescue of the sage, and subsequently punished the bloodthirsty king by destroying his kingdom with lightning and earthquakes. It was the dreadful eclipse, an execrable event that happens every 216 years, in which a new member is added to the God Hand. During the turmoil, the man who would eventually become the Skull Knight lost his supposed beloved and permanently became a dead man stalking the endless night. Roughly 1,000 years later, a baby is expelled from the uterus of a lynched woman and is left to wallow in a pool of amniotic fluid, mud, and blood. A group of bandit mercenaries led by a man named Gambino come upon the tree to witness the horror. Gambino's lover, Shizu, scurried to the puddle of afterbirth and claimed the baby as her own. Gambino reluctantly allowed his despondent lover to keep the child. 3 years later, Guts would say goodbye to his adoptive mother after she contracted the plague. 3 more years would then pass, and a 6-year-old Guts was under the tutelage of Gambino in the ways of the sword and battle. After the talented lad sliced Gambino's face in a sparring match, the abrasive mercenary made a mental note of the incident, and after 3 more years, would accept payment from the vile Donovan to permit him to rape the 9-year-old Guts. Despite Guts' attempts at resistance, Donovan would eventually have his way with the swordsman. Preceding the loathsome event, Guts ambushed Donovan during a foray in the woods, and used a crossbow and sword to bring down the repulsive pedophile. During the same skirmish, Gambino lost his right leg, and was henceforth forced into retirement from the battlefield. 2 years later, an 11-year-old Guts was flourishing in his role as a warrior mercenary, and even killed an enemy general. Gambino, however, could not conceal his hauteur toward the young swordsman, and subsequently ambushed him in the middle of the night. It was then revealed that Donovan bought Guts from Gambino, sending Guts into a trembled shock. Guts clenched his sword and pierced it through Gambino's neck. Accused of murder, Guts stole a horse and fled the band of mercenaries he had been with since birth. But while escaping, a crossbow pierced his flesh, throwing him from the horse and leaving him to the wolves. Despite the improbable odds though, Guts fended off the ravenous wolves and subsequently collapsed onto the ground. A young boy, Serpico, takes care of his emaciated mother while being constantly bullied by other kids. After a severe beating, the youngest daughter of the Vandamayan household, Farnese, tends to him and claims him as her own. Despite her family's wealth, her parents barely acknowledge her. That's where Serpico comes in. Farnese shows Serpico her crematory, where she burns all the quote-unquote bad ones. Serpico then recounts Farnese's penchant for burning people at the stake. One day, the Vandamayan patriarch, Federico III, inspected Serpico's personal locket. and it was there that Serpico discovered that he was the illegitimate son of the wealthy nobleman, meaning that him and Farnese were half-siblings. Roughly 3 years after killing Gambino in self-defense, Guts became a prisoner of war and befriended a man named Martino, who helped him escape a life as a slave laborer. Or so he thought. Because of Guts' wounds, he wasn't able to outrun his captors. However, while Guts was distracting the guards, Martino used the opportunity to escape himself. While hanging on by a thread in a prison cell, he noticed a flower spirit, but thought it was some sort of hallucination. Later on, Guts learns he is to lose a battle to the death to a Viscount's tender-hearted son, hence the reason they are keeping him in a starved/weak state. Again, the flower spirit returns to Guts and reveals her name to be Cheech. Cheech proceeds to heal Guts' wounds, giving him water and warmth throughout the night. In the morning, Guts' fever has broke, but the flower Cheech lived in was dead. Guts prepares for his battle with the Viscount's son, but is given a dull blade that would have difficulty in cutting a watermelon. While struggling with suboptimal strength and an ineffective blade, Guts uses leverage to bend his opponent's arm backwards and stab him in the eye with the hilt of his sword. While using the Viscount's son as a hostage, Martino and other warriors come in to save Guts. Guts then takes the dead flower spirit Cheech in an open field to lay her to rest. Around the same time, give or take a few years, Griffith fosters the Band of the Hawk and saves Casca from being raped by a man of nobility. After killing the vile man, Casca joins the Band of the Hawk and embraces the soldier life. As their notoriety spreads throughout the land, Griffith and the Band of the Hawk accepted work from Lord Genin and the Tudor army. But to acquire money, Griffith was forced to spend a night with the perverted nobleman. The war funds acquired, though, would increase Griffith's chance of acquiring his own kingdom. A great dream, after all, requires great sacrifices. Fast forward 1 year, and the tenacious Guts defeats the menacing Bazuzo, catching the eye of the captivated Hawk. After collecting his war spoils, Guts harshly declines an official role in the army and ventures off on his own. Afterward, the Band of the Hawk notices Guts walking by himself and decides to ambush him on horseback. Guts makes quick work of the men until Casca shoots him with a crossbow and gives Guts a competitive battle with the sword. After knocking Casca down and preparing for the kill, a spear flies in to halt the swordsman from his fatal blow. Griffith proceeds to subdue Guts with relative ease and decides to take him into their camp and warm him up with Casca's body. Upon waking up and walking around a bit, Casca punches Guts in a sensitive area. Griffith then brings Guts to a hill to have a conversation about joining the Band of the Hawk. After much disagreement, the two decide to settle things with swords, and after Griffith demonstrates his clear superiority in swordplay and hand-to-hand combat, Guts reluctantly joins the Band of the Hawk. While recuperating from his wounds, a handful of the Band of the Hawk soldiers look to attack Guts in his weakened state, but Casca intervenes before anything happens. During a night mission, Griffith gives Guts the most important job, the rear guard, showing Griffith's trust in Guts' abilities. The mission proceeds smoothly until the enemy cavalry catch up to Guts, putting him in peril, especially after he falls off his horse. But Griffith comes to the rescue, allowing him to escape through the forest as they blast the enemy with cannon fire. The next morning, Guts sees Griffith taking a shower, and they begin to splash each other. In a non-homo sort of way. Guts then notices the behelit on Griffith's neck, which is called the Egg of the King, and whoever possesses the behelit will attain the world in exchange for his flesh and blood. Griffith then tells Guts, "I will get my own kingdom. You will fight for my cause, because you belong to me." In the next battle, Guts charges in by himself and earns the respect of his fellow comrades, all except for Casca, that is, who excoriates Guts for breaking rank file and endangering the entire mission. Tensions continue to boil until Griffith intervenes. Afterwards, Griffith attains the rank of knighthood, which is unheard of for a commoner. The preceding battle goes well for the most part, until they hear a rumor that Nosferatu Zod has been recruited by the enemy. As the legend goes, the savage warrior has killed for hundreds of years and is considered immortal. Guts, unfazed by the lone man who guards the castle, enters in to fight the demonic creature. Guts does well to stop Zod's sword, which hasn't been done in 50 years, but is completely outmatched by the legendary warrior. Despite this, however, Guts is thrilled by the challenge of fighting the strongest warrior he's known. Guts does well to drive a sword in Zod's body, but this only causes Zod to transform into a demonic beast. As Guts struggles to stay alive, Griffith and his men intervene, but this only angers Zod further. Griffith and Guts then combine their talents to inflict more pain on the immortal Zod. But it isn't long before Zod takes control once again. After approaching Griffith, Zod notices the behelit on his neck and displays a look of unequivocal dread. Zod then gives Guts a prophecy. "If you can be said to be a true friend of this man, then take heed. When his ambition collapses, death will pay you a visit, a death you can never escape." The Band of the Hawk arrive in Windham, the royal capital of Midland, to rest up. After infuriating Casca to no end, she punches Guts in the face. Before he can respond, he notices tears coming from Casca's face. Guts then leaves and swings his sword for a bit to cool off. Griffith then intrudes, and the two begin to contemplate the idea of gods, devils, and Zod. The King of Midland then interjects and offers his gratitude to Griffith for his devout service. Princess Charlotte, the king's only daughter, carelessly trips over a stone, but is caught by Griffith just before she injures herself. General Julius, the king's brother, smacks Griffith for touching the princess, to which Griffith promptly apologizes. Minister Foss then alerts Julius to the fact that the Band of the Hawk will accompany the king on his autumn hunt, angering Julius profoundly. Foss then floats an idea about a stray arrow with poison accidentally hitting Griffith during the upcoming hunt, pleasing Julius immensely. As Griffith is making small talk with Charlotte during the hunt, a wild boar scares the princess's horse, leading her to a small pond where Griffith's assassin patiently waits. After saving Charlotte, the poisonous arrow pierces Griffith's armor. Luckily though, it hit the behelit without touching his skin. After taking note of the strong poison and meeting Julius's gaze, Griffith begins to formulate his own machinations, one in which Griffith asks Guts to kill Julius, who is second in line to the throne. After secretly watching Julius train his son, Adonis, in the way of the sword, Guts is reminded of his time with Gambino and begins to have reservations about the assassination plot. Guts goes through with it anyway though, killing Julius rather easily. But when a door creaks open, Guts lunges forward and kills Adonis as well. Guts proceeds to fight his way through the castle, and after reaching a point of pure exhaustion, passes out in an underground channel. After returning to the Hawk, battered and bruised, Guts goes to Griffith, who is having a conversation with Charlotte. Much is said during the conversation, but the most important part comes when Griffith says, "What I think a friend is one who is my equal," sending a shockwave into Guts' soul. With Julius gone, the Band of the Hawk becomes the kingdom's vanguard, and as such, Griffith assumes a prominent position. Foss then contemplates eliminating Griffith in the future, but when he notices that Griffith has been staring him down, he experiences an inescapable dread. Before departing, Charlotte hands Griffith a good luck necklace to take into battle. Charlotte's mother, the Queen, castigates Charlotte for associating with Griffith, a man of humble birth. In the preceding battle, Casca comes face to face with Adon of the Blue Whale Knights, and ends up in some trouble before Guts comes to her aid. Guts takes care of business, but because Casca was experiencing stomach pains, for unknown reasons, she passes out and falls off a ledge as Guts comes to her rescue. After resuscitating Casca, Guts drags her inside of a tree, as a torrential downpour was not letting up. Guts quickly realizes, though, that the female warrior would die of hypothermia if he didn't strip her clothes off and warm her body up with his own heat. Guts then realizes that Casca's stomach pain was coming from her monthly period. Upon waking up, Guts makes crude remarks about Casca being a woman, receiving the female swordsman's scorn. Casca then recounts the past events that were discussed earlier, with her joining the Band of the Hawk. Guts then realizes that the enemy is closing in on their position, and tells Casca that they leave by nightfall. Unfortunately, they don't make it far before being surrounded by the Blue Whale Knights. After denying Adon's deal, Guts and Casca make their final stand. Adon eventually calls upon a towering man named Samson, who initially gives Guts some trouble, before he has his head sliced open. Guts instructs Casca to take this moment to escape, and return to her swordmaster, Griffith. Guts begins to slice and dice the horde of adversaries, as Casca gets captured. Luckily, she defends herself long enough before the Band of the Hawk intervenes. But there's no time for leisure, as Casca leads her comrades to Guts, who just finished killing 100 men by himself. Upon returning to camp, Casca receives elf dust from Judo to heal Guts' wounds. While applying the dust, Guts and Casca talk about the light of fire personifying one's dream, and how Griffith has combined those tiny fires into one blazing inferno. Guts also hints at the idea of leaving the Band of the Hawk. Afterwards, Griffith finds himself in a meeting with the Midland generals and the king about seizing the Tudor army's stronghold, Doldry Castle. Griffith volunteers the Band of the Hawk for the mission of taking the stronghold via fighting the Purple Rhino Knights. Meanwhile, at Doldry Castle, Lord Gennon requests that Bascan, the leader of the Purple Rhino Knights, to capture Griffith, alive and unharmed. During the climactic battle, it seems the two opposing forces are evenly matched, but Griffith decides to retreat his men. Bascan, though, seems content with yielding to this move. But Lord Gennon demands that they capture the White Hawk, so they recklessly send all their men in pursuit of the Band of the Hawk. While the Purple Rhino Knights are distracted, Casca and a fleet of men burst through the Doldry barrier to seize the castle. However, to take the castle, Casca must defeat Adon. Meanwhile, the Band of the Hawk has re-engaged with the Purple Rhino Knights, and Guts finds himself paired up against the formidable Bascan. In the midst of the battle, Guts' sword breaks, and it looks like it's all over, until Nosferatu Zod chucks a sword from a nearby cliff to Guts' position. Guts grabs the sword and chops off the head of Bascan, while Casca takes down Adon. With the capture of the castle and the death of their leader, the Band of the Hawk completed their mission, and to cap things off, Griffith expelled Lord Gennon from his mortal existence. However, before Zod leaves the scene, he claims, "The eclipse will soon come." Afterwards, Foss, the Queen, and other cloaked figures plot their revenge on Griffith for killing Julius. Griffith and the Band of the Hawk return to Midland to a celebratory parade, but during the proceedings, Foss reads a distressing note and begins to panic. A celebratory ball is held for the Band of the Hawk's accomplishment, and the king declares that each member of the Hawk will be knighted, and that Griffith would become the White Phoenix General. During the king's toast, Griffith took a sip from his chalice and collapsed onto the floor. While celebrating their accomplishment of killing Griffith, the queen and her accomplices noticed some smoke coming from the creaks of the floor. After finding out the room was locked, an explosive fire engulfed them, leaving them to burn alive in their own grave. Griffith, who faked his own death, watched the affair from a safe distance and claimed, "Those who die on the battlefield are not royalty, nobility, or commoners. They are the defeated who die." Afterwards, it is revealed that Griffith used Foss' allegiance to the queen to arrange the eventual betrayal. He did so by kidnapping Foss's daughter, Elise, who he promptly returned after the queen's death. To tie up loose ends, Guts killed the men who kidnapped the minister's daughter, as instructed by Griffith. Several days later, a royal funeral was held for the queen. A month afterwards, Guts collected his belongings and prepared himself for a new adventure without the Band of the Hawk. Casca caught up to Guts and delayed him long enough for Corcus and Judo to take Guts to a bar and talk things over a bit. Although much is said, Guts' central message is that he wants to be on equal footing with Griffith via searching for his own dream and purpose in life. Upon leaving, Judo has a one-on-one talk with Guts and even floats the idea of pursuing Casca. Guts, shocked by this statement, claims that Griffith and Casca are meant to be, but Judo reveals that Griffith must marry Charlotte if he is ever to attain his own kingdom. As day breaks, Guts runs into Griffith and the other prominent members of the Hawk. After Guts makes his intentions known, Griffith draws his sword and claims, "I thought I told you then that you belong to me." Griffith and Guts prepare for their monumental battle, each man allowing a million thoughts to race through their mind. Yet, Guts seems more placid than the normally serene Griffith. Meanwhile, Casca is torn between who she wants to win. Griffith plays out scenarios in his head of how he will defeat Guts, and determines that if he was to kill him, it's better than not having him in his service at all. With the drop of some snow, Griffith lunges towards Guts, fully intending to kill the swordsman. But it is to no avail, as Guts' powerful swing chips Griffith's sword, flinging the point of the blade in another direction. Guts, henceforth, is the winner. Casca desperately pleads with Guts to stay. Nevertheless, the swordsman is firm in his resolve, and doesn't so much as glance back at her or his other companions. Under the moonlight, Guts reminisces about his time with the Band of the Hawk. That is, until an ominous spirit, resembling Nosferatu's Zod, approaches his position, and lashes his sword towards Guts. After evading the strike, the figure comes into focus. It is a man, or specter of a man, who divulges a mysterious premonition about an event that will occur in 1 year's time, the eclipse. During the same time, Griffith appears at Charlotte's window and uses the opportunity to gift her a night she would not soon forget. Unfortunately, one of Charlotte's handmaids saw the lustful behavior through a keyhole and reported the findings to the king's royal guard. Griffith, henceforth, was captured. The king wasted no time in flogging Griffith in the torture chambers. Unfazed by the physical pain, Griffith insinuates that the king wishes to have Charlotte for himself, enraging the king to no end. Yet, it turns out that Griffith's accusation was true, revealing the king to be a bona fide pervert. Afterward, the Band of the Hawk is tasked with an erroneous mission to lure them into a compromised position. Meanwhile, Griffith continues being tortured by a deformed man. The man inspects Griffith's behelit, but accidentally drops it into the sewer. Meanwhile, Guts is staying with a blacksmith, Godo, and his daughter. It's a pivotal period in which Guts learns more about himself and his purpose in life. Roughly a year later, an arms tournament is being held, in which we meet Salat, a Kushan warrior. Despite his slender appearance, Salat makes quick work of his hulking opponent. Next up on the docket is Guts, but he is not thrilled by his said opponent, so he proposes that him and Salat duel one another. Salat's quick maneuvers surprise Guts at first, but it's not long before he demonstrates his clear superiority. Afterwards, Guts finds out that Casca is now the leader of the Band of the Hawk, leaving him in a state of enraged confusion. We learn that Casca has been in charge of the Band of the Hawk for a year now, and is beginning to show signs of mental and physical fatigue. After getting ambushed by Salat and his men, Guts intrudes upon the proceedings, and re-engages Salat for another battle. Salat does well to prove his mettle, but Guts ultimately proves too much for the crafty warrior. After the Hawk rejoices in Guts' return, they get Guts up to speed with all the events over the past year, and inform him that their sole mission is to rescue Griffith. Casca inadvertently asks Guts to have a discussion, not with words though, but with the sword. After Casca misses several times, she yells, "Griffith's no good without you," and subsequently pierces Guts. Casca bemoans what became of the Hawk, and how her dream died the day Guts left Griffith's side. She collapses near a cliff, but Guts hastily grabs her arm in the nick of time and throws her to safety. In the throes of all the emotional turmoil and vulnerability, Casca lowers her barriers and allows Guts to embrace her in a surprising display of love. Consequently, as Guts assumes a certain position, he is reminded of the night that Donovan raped him, and without thinking, he places his hands around Casca's neck. Guts then divulges his heinous past and his regrets for killing his foster father, Gambino. Casca calms the swordsman down by giving him emotional reassurance, something Guts has rarely experienced in his life. Guts lets Casca know that he will aid them in saving Griffith, but will part ways thereafter, henceforth claiming, "From now on, every battle will be my own." After a brief dispute by the fated lovers, Guts declares his intentions of being with Casca for the foreseeable future. While hallucinating in his torture chamber, Griffith begins to see 4 mysterious figures shrouded in darkness, who say, "We shall meet. We are kinsmen, O blessed king of longing." Casca leads an expedition to Windham to rescue Griffith. During the night, they enter an underground passage that leads to a mausoleum. There they meet Charlotte, who guides them through the labyrinth that is the castle. While walking, Charlotte tells Casca that Griffith was in the chamber the night he got caught by the handmaid. They arrive at the Tower of Rebirth, where Griffith is being kept, and Judo floats the idea of taking Charlotte as a hostage. Charlotte, listening in, volunteers herself as a hostage. Despite reservations, Casca eventually accepts Charlotte as a hostage. After Judo takes out the guards, the Hawk enters the Tower of Rebirth. Meanwhile, back at camp, Rickard notices an elf in the night sky. Hastily, he returns to camp, only to find blazing fires and a horde of monsters. The specter that warned Guts of the eclipse 1 year prior comes to Rickard's aid and wards off the fearsome monsters. While Rickard sobs in fear, the specter leaps into the night as if he never existed at all. While descending down the Tower of Rebirth, Charlotte recounts the story of King Gaiseric that was discussed at the beginning of this video. And Guts remarks, "Sounds kinda like Griffith." At the bottom of the tower, unbeknownst to the members of the Hawk, are the remains of Gaiseric's kingdom and a slew of skulls with an ominous mark on their foreheads. The Hawk arrives at Griffith's chamber, only to find the former leader in a wretched state. Guts opens Griffith's helmet, only to be horrified by what he sees. Then, as Griffith notices Guts, he puts his hands around the swordsman's neck, as if to choke him. Something Judo picks up on, but no one else really does. But Guts, overcome with emotion, embraces Griffith in a hug. But this reunion takes a turn when the deformed man locks the cell door. Guts asks if the deranged man tortured Griffith, and when the man admits to his misconduct, Griffith drives his sword through the door and into the deformed man's chest. An arrow comes down to warn Guts and his comrades to stand down, but Guts goes berserk and slaughters his way through every last guard, leaving nothing but blood and entrails in his wake. The king witnesses the remains of the battle, bemoans losing his precious Charlotte, and instructs the guards to summon the Bakiraka, a group of 5 highly skilled assassins who barely resemble men at all. While escaping the sewer, the Hawk runs into the Bakiraka, and while one blows a dart toward Griffith, Charlotte shields him with her own body, but passes out in the process. The Bakiraka offer to take Charlotte off their hands and give her the necessary antidote to the poison in the dart. Charlotte denies, and the band of the Hawk fight the Bakiraka under the instruction of Judo. After they take out some of the members, a blazing fire comes down the sewer, forcing the Hawk to run. After some quick thinking by Pippin, the Hawk escapes the Bakiraka. After the king is disappointed and dispatches the Bakiraka, he decides to send out Wyald and the Black Dog Knights. A glimpse 5 years in the past shows Wyald to be a ruthless, animal-like man that took charge of a criminal warrior group called the Black Dog Knights. Such was their callous nature that they would violate women and butcher children. And now they were after the band of the Hawk. After raping and mutilating a village of civilians, the dogs were rapidly closing in on the Hawk. Guts and Pippin slashed through the weaker soldiers, but Wyald stepped in and caught Guts' hand in mid-swing. Up ahead, Casca rigs a bridge with explosives, while Guts becomes ominously aware of how strong Wyald truly is, comparing him to Zod and the Skull Knight. After the bridge blows up, Wyald walks through unscathed. As the Hawk continues to run away, Guts contemplates the Skull Knight's words from 1 year ago. Wyald continues to plow through each trap the Hawk sets, until Guts declares one-on-one combat with the animal-like man. Wyald easily blocks each of Guts' swift attacks, even catching his blade in his mouth. While this continues to go on, Casca and the Hawk take control of the battle with the Black Dog Knights. Wyald, unfazed by this loss, punches a tree down on his own men. Wyald then transforms into a demonic beast, much like Zod, and puts Guts down for the count. Wyald proceeds to obliterate every soldier in sight, while Casca attempts to wake Guts up. Wyald seizes the opportunity to grab Casca, strip her down, and slide his tongue dick around her body, until Guts slices that chubby clean off. Guts begins his final assault on Wyald, even though he is trembling in ways he's never trembled. Despite doing well to chop Wyald down and inflict damage, the hulking monster proves too robust for Guts. The injuries begin to take their toll on Guts, and apprehension begins to break his resolve. But a last-ditch tactic is tried, one in which Guts chokes Wyald with a sword and jabs a dagger into his eye. And it works. Casca sews up Guts' wounds and becomes distressed by his disregard for his well-being. Guts then has a one-side conversation with Griffith, and subsequently places Griffith's armor on his body. Wyald, who is supposed to be dead, is still hanging on by a thread. Upon entering the Hawk's camp, he grabs Griffith and urges him to summon them, the Great Ones, our guardian angels. Wyald then strips Griffith's armor down to reveal the appalling state of his physical body. After wondering where Griffith's behelit is, Zod barges in and pitchforks Wyald with his horns and tears his body asunder. Zod tells Griffith that the behelit will return to his hand and promptly leaves. The Band of the Hawk is in a state of turmoil amidst the realization that Griffith's dream is dead. Casca goes to change Griffith's bandages, and while doing so, Griffith falls down on her. Seeing the trembled state that he is in, Casca can do nothing more than place a reassuring hand on his back. While contemplating his future, the Hawks members request that Guts lead them. Guts then talks to Casca, and she mentions how she can't leave Griffith in such a fragile state. But she urges Guts to push forward and attain his own dream. Listening in, Griffith sees a vision of the kingdom he so sorely desires. Using the last of his strength, Griffith takes the horse's reins and desperately pursues his dying dream. The carriage hits a rock, and Griffith is thrown into the air. A vision occurs where Griffith contemplates a fantasy marriage with Casca. Reality strikes back in the most cruel of fashions. To Griffith, suicide looks like a sweet blessing at this point. But he can't go through with it. It is then that Griffith finds the behelit in his hand. The Hawk catches up to Griffith and sees a sight beyond words. Despite the ominous atmosphere, Guts rushes towards Griffith, and as soon as he touches his shoulder, the festival begins. The Hawk begins to panic at the abject horror they are witnessing. The eclipse, as it were, is bringing terrible creatures to life. A gigantic naked woman with dark wings rises up. A fat-faced man with glasses smiles down at the Hawk. A bald man who clenches his hands together keeps his mouth ajar in a most peculiar fashion. And a cloaked man with his entire brain exposed casts an impressive shadow over the entire proceedings. The four gods are here for the honorable child, the Hawk, and the companions of the Hawk are to be his sacrifice. So Griffith may become a demon. The time is now at hand for us to perform the invocation of doom. Griffith rises to the godly altar, attempting to take Guts with him. As Griffith comes face to face with the angels/demons, he takes a step back into his own past. He quickly comes to a pile of dead bodies and realizes that they all died for his cause, to build the Crimson Bridge to the desired kingdom. But many more bodies were needed to accomplish the goal. Apologize, repent, and say goodbye to the dream. Pile the corpses and chant, "I sacrifice," and the dream will continue with raven black wings. Griffith accepts the proposition and admits that Guts was the only man to ever make him forget his dream. Each member of the Hawk is branded, and the festival begins its gruesome barrage of attacks. Guts learns that those marked with the brand of sacrifice will be hunted down incessantly until their agonizing death. Outside the eclipse, Rickard comes upon a whirlwind that is raining lightning, and in the distance, he sees Skull Knight and Zod fighting each other. Amid the battle, Zod barks at Skull Knight. "You, who have been our foe for a millennium, I figured you wouldn't let this chance slip past." Zod and Skull Knight continue their battle as everything goes to hell inside the eclipse. Judo and Casca escape on a horse, but it isn't long before the monsters knock them down. Judo defends Casca with his body, while Casca makes her own attempts at fighting back. Due to severe blood loss, Judo can't impart his final message of love to Casca and ends up tumbling in stride. The monsters close in on Casca and begin to tear her clothes off. Guts ferociously fights off the endless barrage of monsters as Griffith begins to sink into another world. God? The mysterious swirling being announces itself as the idea of evil, his essence coming into being because of the human need for reason. It weaves destiny through the lower levels of human consciousness, manipulating history for reasons that remain unknown. It concludes by stating, "Do as you will, chosen one." Griffith then asks God for wings, to which he obliges. Guts continues fighting, losing control of his sanity in the process. Friend after friend perishes in front of his eyes, as the situation looks increasingly insurmountable. Then, Guts sees Casca completely naked and in the possession of a monster, and completely goes berserk. An ominous silence pauses the bloodshed, as the new member of the God Hand is officially born. The new Demon King, Femto, is born. Griffith/Femto softly glides down to Guts' position, and he proceeds to grope Casca as Guts' rage is seething. Femto then violates Casca, while Guts attempts to chop off his own arm, due to the fact that it is trapped in a monster's mouth. The scene ends with Guts completely losing it and screaming, "Griffith!" Femto continues his sordid display, while Guts is forced to watch. As things reach their climax, Skull Knight bursts through the eclipse barrier and forcefully swings his sword toward the leader of the God Hand, Void. But due to a spatial distortion manifested by Void, Skull Knight ends up hitting himself. Skull Knight rushes down the gigantic hand and grabs Guts and Casca as he escapes the hell-like event. The God Hand then remarks that it is only the beginning of the Age of Darkness. Skull Knight tosses Guts and Casca toward Rickard and tells Zod they would postpone their battle. Zod, surprised by Guts' ability to survive the calamitous event, agrees to Skull Knight's terms, as he's intrigued how Guts will survive in a world of darkness. After waking from a nightmare, Guts finds himself in a cave, being taken care of by Rickard and Erica. When Guts sees Casca, he attempts to talk to her, but she resists, much like a child would, and even bites his hand in the process. Guts runs from the cave in a panic, thinking about his memories from the past years. After collapsing from exhaustion, Guts notices demon-like spirits in the grass. Skull Knight pops in and remarks, "From now on, this is your world. The boundary between the mortal world and that of the dead, the interstice." Skull Knight hands Guts a sword, and Guts announces his declaration of war against the inhuman spirits, allowing his anger to consume him completely. After the spirits dissipate, Skull Knight warns Guts they've found another light in the darkness, i.e. Casca. Guts and Skull Knight rush to Casca's position as they find her surrounded by demonic spirits. Casca clenches her abdominal region as a demonic child is expelled from her uterus. Per Skull Knight's advice, Guts clenches the demonic being with intent to kill, but Casca screams in horror. As day breaks, the child dissolves into nothingness, but Skull Knight says the child will persist and most likely return to its parents, i.e. Guts and Casca. Skull Knight then leaves Guts and wishes him the best of luck. Guts and Casca's troubles continue. Goto then fits Guts with a new prosthetic arm that has a cannon inside. Just then, a demonic beast arrives at Goto's doorstep. Guts' new sword is insufficient in cutting down the beast. But once he sees the Dragon Slayer, a massive sword that weighs hundreds of pounds, he slices the Apostle down the middle. Guts leaves Casca in the cave with Rickert as he sets off on his new adventure. Upon reaching the age of 16, Farnese's father arranges a marriage for his rebellious daughter. Farnese recommends that Serpico and her should run away together, but Serpico hesitates, leaving Farnese in a state of distress. To relieve her inner turmoil, Farnese sets the mansion ablaze and is later sent to a monastery to speak to God to temper her devilish tendencies. Farnese then assumes the role of the leader of the Holy Iron Chain Knights and takes pride in burning heretics. As it just so happens, Serpico's mother was also labeled a heretic. And because Serpico whispered mother while she was at the stake, and to avoid suspicion that he was also a heretic, Farnese took the torch, handed it in Serpico's hand, and they lit his mother ablaze together. Sometime afterward, the Holy Iron Chain Knights are going to the Red Lake, where the eclipse occurred 1 year ago. Farnese, the leader of the Iron Chain Knights, talks about the fifth angel, the Hawk of Darkness, who will usher in an age of darkness. 2 years later, Guts arrives in a tavern and bloodies up some Coca thugs. He tells one of the men to tell his boss, i.e. the Snake Baron, the Black Swordsman has come. Puck, an elf who was abused by the thugs, becomes an ally to the brooding swordsman. After being tortured and imprisoned by the mayor of Coca, who plans to hand Guts over to the Snake Baron, Guts gets healed by Puck and subsequently escapes his prison. Guts uses his prosthetic arm, which also serves as a revolving crossbow, to take down the Snake Baron's men. After Guts struggles a bit with the Snake Baron, he eventually takes control of the situation. He then asks the Snake Baron the whereabouts of the God Hand, and when he utters that he has no idea where the God Hand resides, Guts proceeds to abuse the snake-like apostle for his own amusement. After some disparaging words to Puck, Guts catches a ride with an old man and a young girl. Guts falls asleep and dreams of a labyrinth in which he's chased by Casca's deformed demon child. Guts shows them his brand of sacrifice mark on his neck and explains the evil spirits feed off of fear. The carriage stops and the girl gets out, only to be pierced by a sharp weapon. Guts then fights off a slew of possessed corpses. He then notices the girl's been possessed and kills the old man in the carriage. After taking care of business and surviving the night, Puck laments the death of the girl and the old man, while Guts laughs in a crazed manner. Guts arrives in a new land where heretics are getting their heads chopped off. After making his presence known to the Count, Guts is surrounded by ironclad warriors. However, they stand no chance against Guts' massive chunk of iron, otherwise known as the Dragon Slayer. Guts makes quick work of the towering man that is wielding a warhammer. It should be noted that Puck is meandering around Guts at this point as well. After escaping a smoke grenade, Guts ends up in the house of a mutilated man, Vargas, who claims the Count has cut off his body parts and ate them. Vargas then shows Guts a behelit that he stole from the Count. Apparently, the Count attained the behelit 7 years ago, resulting in a fascination with torture and eating people alive. Vargas, unfortunately, was forced to watch the Count eat his wife and sons. Guts explains that the Behelit is a key that summons demons from another dimension, the 5 members of the God Hand. In the meantime, the Count places a demon inside Zondark, the man with the Warhammer, and he thus uses his increased strength to smash through Vargas's house. Although putting up a better fight than last time, Guts easily dispatches Zondark. That is, until the parasitic Count reveals himself. As the house begins to collapse, Guts, Puck, and Vargas escape through a secret passage. Guts claims the Behelit from Vargas, before parting ways with the deformed man. Immediately afterward, Vargas is caught by the parasitic Count, and is set to be beheaded. Puck urges Guts to save Vargas, but Guts displays no empathy. After the beheading, Guts sees the demoned baby child once more, but this time with Vargas's face. Guts then vows he'll kill the Count for Vargas. The Count gives Puck as a gift to his daughter, Teresa, but bemoans the fact that she won't let him touch her. Guts enters the Count's castle and runs into Zondark once again. After regenerating several times, Guts cuts off the head of the parasitic creature and smashes it against a wall. Teresa tells Puck that pagans sacrificed her mother to their god, and ever since then, the Count has relentlessly punished heretics. Guts slices through more guards before confronting the Count, who has some surprises up his sleeve. The Count transforms into his final form, and Guts learns the seriousness of his situation. The Count bruises and batters Guts to the point that the Black Swordsman displays a look of unparalleled dread. The blows take their toll on Guts, leaving him unable to defend himself. Puck notices the Behelit and attempts to keep it from the Count. The Count chases him down until he is seen by Teresa, who instinctively screams in horror. Guts enters the fray again and eventually uses Teresa as a shield. After blasting the Count and chopping off his head, Guts begins to torture the demonic beast in front of Puck and Teresa. The Count screams, "I don't want to die!" And the Behelit activates, causing a spatial distortion that is oddly reminiscent of an M.C. Escher piece of work. It is then that Guts notices the presence of the God Hand. "Griffith!" The Count pleads with Void, whom he calls Archangel, to kill the Black Swordsman, but they refuse, stating, "His petty existence is beneath our notice." Guts attempts to attack his nemesis, Griffith, but the demon's mere presence causes him pain, as he is repelled backward. The God Hand then recount the events that led to the Count becoming an apostle. It turns out the Count's wife venerated the pagan god through sexual practices, and when he saw this, he sacrificed his wife to the God Hand to become an apostle. Now, to achieve his burning desire, killing the Black Swordsman, he would have to sacrifice his daughter, Teresa. The God Hand show the Count what hell looks like, and tell him he has 2 paths: to be reborn as a demon, or be absorbed by demoned kind. The Count is tormented by the decision, but is unable to respond. The dead soul of Vargas, as well as others, drag the Count to hell. The spirits go for Guts next, as he shoots his cannon toward Griffith. After the departure of the God Hand, Teresa sobs for a bit, but eventually blames Guts for her misfortunes, provoking her to yell, "I'll kill you!" Thus provoking Guts to have a look of absolute sorrow on his face, something that surprises Puck immensely, and also creates one of the greatest memes of all time. "'Cause you had a bad day, you're taking one down, you sing a sad." Sometime after Guts saw the God Hand at the Count's castle, he saves a girl named Jill from being mutilated by some bandits. After a tree spirit scares the bandits, Guts has his turn, and despite some difficulties, he eventually takes down the evil spirits. Afterward, Jill sees Puck and begins to tremble, thinking he's an elf from the Misty Valley. Jill leads Guts and Puck to her village, where she gets abused by her drunkard father. The village folk see Puck and grab their weapons with killer's intent. After Guts destroys a cart, the village folk back down, and Jill directs Guts to an abandoned windmill, where he will stay for the night. The next morning, Jill tells a cryptic story about elves killing livestock and carrying away children. Just then, the elves enter Jill's village, obliterating everything in sight. Upon seeing the pesky creatures, Guts uses his sword as a fly swatter. Guts then uses a small child as bait to lure the elves to a small barn, where he blasts them to smithereens with his cannon. Guts encounters the Queen Elf, who appears to be an apostle due to his bleeding brand mark. After missing her with his sword, Puck notices that these are not elves at all, but children. The Queen Elf mysteriously calls Puck Peacalf, the outcast, and begins her assault. Until Jill calls her Rosine, and she mysteriously runs off. The burning elves turn back to children, and the townsfolk are enraged with Guts. Guts uses Jill as a hostage to escape the situation, and makes his way to the Misty Valley. He must rest up for the night though, and when the sun goes down, he sees the demon child in the fire, and numerous blazing children walking toward him. Guts retches at the thought of killing children, and goes insane in the process of butchering them. After getting hurt and escaping with Jill, he inquires more info about Peacalf. Turns out Peacalf was a boy with pointy ears and a red nose, who was an outcast in his village. Apparently, he was healed by elves as a baby, and was permanently imprinted with their distinct physical characteristics. Jill remarks that Rosine once said, "I am just like the boy from the story, Peacalf." Jill recounts her history with Rosine, noting the red-colored stone, i.e. Bahalit, she carried around with her. One night, she said goodbye to Jill and disappeared into the Misty Valley, apparently sacrificing her parents to become an apostle. Rosine then comes to Jill and invites her to the Misty Valley. Guts lunges in with his sword and injures Rosine, causing her to become enraged. Rosine then flies away with Jill and entices her to become an elf. Guts enters the Misty Valley, only to find the bandits that harassed Jill, but this time they have transformed into demonic creatures. Guts staves off the insect-like apostles, but quickly realizes there are numerous more. Yet, despite the improbable odds, Guts gets a crazed look in his eye and begins slaughtering every last one of them. As Guts continues fighting against a praying mantis and a stag beetle, the Holy Iron Chain Knights arrive in the village and find out that the Black Swordsman killed the children and has been the instigator of numerous grisly incidents. Guts' battle with the mantis and the beetle is not going well, as he's sustaining severe damage. In a last-ditch effort, however, he blasts the two with his cannon and strikes them down with his massive sword. Despite this victory, Guts' blood loss is reaching a critical level. Back to Rosine and Jill, they finally reach the Misty Valley, and it looks like a virtual paradise. Rosine asks Jill to stay and become an elf, but Jill is unsure. As she contemplates the idea, Puck attempts to persuade her otherwise. Suddenly, the elves begin killing each other in a joyful manner. Horrified by the sight of dead elves turning back into dead children, Jill and Puck run away to an area with giant cocoons. Rosine enters in and explains that the cocoons are used to transform children into elves. After some disagreement between the two, Rosine sedates Jill and tells her not to worry, for she'll be an elf soon enough. Jill sees the mangled bodies and snaps out of it. Guts sets the cocoons ablaze as he smashes more elves with his sword. Jill looks at Guts and begins to tremble, feeling as though he is a terrifying monster. Meanwhile, the Holy Iron Chain Knights see the massacre the Black Swordsman left behind from earlier, and Farnese claims, "Black Swordsman, no, Hawk of Darkness, I swear, I will catch you personally. I swear it's on my faith." The elves attack Guts all at once, but the Black Swordsman sets everything ablaze, including himself, and uses the goo from inside the cocoons to douse himself. Guts attempts to strike Rosine, but she is too quick for his sword. Rosine then transforms into a bug-like demon with an antenna resembling a spear, and fully charges towards Guts. Although she misses, Rosine flies by Guts at supersonic speeds, causing Guts to feel intense pain, especially in his eardrums. Guts blocks his head with his arms, and when Rosine pierces him, she takes him up to the sky. Guts feigns that he's passed out, and when Rosine lets her guard down, he blasts her with his cannon. Guts falls from the sky and crashes on the hard ground. Although causing significant damage to Rosine, Guts laments how he failed to kill her up until this point. Looking at Jill, Guts gets an idea. A savage idea. Rosine rushes to Jill and says the two can run away together. However, with the Apostle distracted, Guts gashes Rosine with his sword. And as a result, blood and a dead corpse fall onto Jill, causing her to laugh maniacally. Guts holds on to Rosine as she flies into the air. In the climactic battle, Rosine is absolutely losing it, laughing in a crazed manner, and Guts is going just as insane, with vengeance. Guts eventually slices Rosine open like a watermelon as he falls back to the ground, and Rosine does the same. We then take a brief glimpse into the past. When Rosine first went to the Misty Valley, she was looking for elves but couldn't find any, and her father and mother found her. But unfortunately, her father began to slap her and call her an idiot for believing in such things. At the peak of emotional turmoil, Rosine began to cry and the Behelit activated. And we can thusly conclude that Rosine did in fact sacrifice her parents to become an apostle. As Rosine is in her final moments, she begins to talk to Jill on how there were no elves. But Puck reassures her that at one point, there were elves in the Misty Valley. Despite this bittersweet ending, Guts begins to absolutely lose himself in rage. Guts, apoplectic with rage, brings his sword to its apex, readying it to strike Rosine. Jill, with tears in her eyes, pleads with Guts to stop. Guts, with his rage at its peak, is hit with an arrow from Jill's father, and is chased away by the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Rosine wakes up and says she has to fly home for dinner. After some touching moments, Rosine fades away into the night. The Holy Iron Chain Knights continue looking for Guts, as Jill asks to travel with the Black Swordsman. Guts shows her the world she'd be entering if she did so. Guts slices some demon spirits, covers Jill with his cloak, and says, "There's no paradise for you to escape to." Guts leaves into the night, and Jill says goodbye to Puck as day breaks. Skull Knight sees the remnants of Guts' mess in the Misty Valley. Skull Knight finds Rosine's Behelit, and mysteriously eats it. Guts is haunted by evil spirits that tell him he'll become a beast of darkness if he continues on his current path. As Guts wonders how many more apostles he has to kill to reach Griffith, Puck rejoins Guts' journey. But it looks like the Holy Iron Chain Knights have found their target. Farnese tells her men to seize the Black Swordsman. In his exhausted state, Guts can't swing his sword, so he gets a little bit creative with dodging the soldiers. But when he's cornered, he musters all the strength he can and cuts through 5 men at once. Vice Commander Azan intervenes with his iron club and throws a barrage of swift yet precise attacks Guts' way. Despite his debilitated state, Guts dodges well enough, but as he starts to lose feeling in his limbs, Guts jumps on Azan's club and goes for Farnese. As Farnese trembles in fear, she feebly attacks Guts, while Serpico tosses a dart in Guts' thigh. Overcome with damage and exhaustion, Guts face plants, and the Holy Iron Chain Knights cheer Farnese's valor. Guts is placed in a medieval restraint as he's taken to the Holy Iron Chain Knights encampment. Farnese begins to question Guts' motives, but when Guts mocks her conception of God, Farnese whips him with fury. Guts is placed in a small cage in the frigid night, just as the demons are drawn to his blood. Luckily, Puck stole the keys to the cage, and when Guts goes to retrieve his gear, he sees Farnese, shirtless, and participating in self-flagellation. With a small chop, Guts incapacitates Farnese, and uses her as a hostage to escape the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Serpico makes chase though, but as he draws his crossbow, he notices a cavalcade of demonic spirits. The spirits attack Guts, and Farnese begins to panic. After being thrown from the horse, Farnese sees the spirits enter wild dogs, and can't believe her eyes. Guts responds, "That is why it's called a miracle." Guts slashes the demonic dogs, as Farnese goes to the horse to mount it and escape. But this is no ordinary horse. No, it is the infamous rape horse of Berserk. After seeing Farnese in distress and being reminded of Casca, Guts slashes the horse and the other demons until daybreak. Farnese bemoans her uselessness while an evil spirit enters her body. The spirit insinuates that she whips herself for sexual pleasure. Farnese then strips and climbs on top of Guts' sword. With her vag on the blade, she asks Guts to split her open, slowly. Puck wards off the spirit, and Farnese tells Serpico to kill Guts. Serpico sidesteps this request, but proves his mettle with a quick draw of the sword. Plagues and calamitous events are ravishing the land, but the people believe a desired hawk will bring peace. Laban, a Midland general, sees the devastation and dreadful state of affairs. As Laban reflects on the downfall of the kingdom, the second-in-command reports that the king has succumbed to illness. The rats then configure themselves to resemble Conrad of the God Hand. Charlotte is summoned to the king in his dying state. Foss then says, "The hawk will come again." The king is in a state of delirium, seeing the Griffith-like hawk come down and prevent Charlotte from touching him. Thunder cracks in the sky, and the king passes away. In a battlefield, Zod kills 300 armed soldiers. Afterwards, he wonders if anyone besides Skull Knight can challenge him. The White Hawk descends upon him. Zod roars with all his strength, but the hawk slices off one of his horns with a gust of wind. An ominous quote is read: "When the sky falls at the holy ground where blind sheep gather and erect a pillar of fire, it will come. The desired will come." Guts takes a nap and dreams of Casca getting burned at the stake. Upon waking up, Guts sees the demon child once more, but this time with Casca's face, and she repeats the same prophecy that Zod just heard. Worried about Casca, Guts returns to Godo's house. Erica took Casca to pick fruit, and Casca escaped. Erica sobs and berates Guts for leaving for 2 years. Guts then finds out that Godo is in poor health. Godo proceeds to lecture Guts on how he should abandon his current path, as he's become a metaphorical sword with a large crack. Rickert and Erica take Guts to the Hill of Swords, a resting ground for the fallen members of the Band of the Hawk. Guts rest up for the night, but Godo's words about abandoning Casca ring in his head. As Guts relives the eclipse, the Beast of Darkness returns and tells Guts, "The blood must flow, so keep killing. It will still thirst, forever, all alone, always." Guts wonders if he's made the same mistake in leaving the Hawk that he made with Casca, but he stands and proclaims, "I'll never lose her again." Although he's ill, Godo refashioned Guts' sword to its former glory, and Rickert repairs Guts' prosthetic arm. Guts makes his way to St. Albion Temple, otherwise known as the Tower of Conviction. The Holy Iron Chain Knights talk about the Kushan invasion that happened recently, and we see a glimpse of Farnese being relieved of her assignment of capturing the Black Swordsman. Their new assignment is to guard the most feared and reviled Inquisitor in the land, Mosgus. A group of people are after Mosgus's head, but his disciples, or torturers, take care of business. Mosgus then proclaims that all the accused of murder will be condemned to death by the wheel. A sobbing man falls into Casca's arms, pleading for help. Luca, a new character, takes Casca away from the abhorrent event, but Casca, in her childlike state, simply smiles in joy. A teenage kid, Isidro, poisons some men who try to steal his food. Just then, Kushan soldiers kill the men, leaving Isidro in a distressed state. Guts enters the scene, does some Guts things, and leaves Isidro flabbergasted. Salat and the Bakiraka see the affair, but choose to restrain themselves for now, and focus on finding the Land of Oracle. At a refugee camp, the skin of a flayed priest hangs from a branch. The refugees beg the Holy Iron Chain Knights for rations and firewood, but Mosgus intervenes and claims, "God shall show his mercy." After tending to a woman's dying child, Mosgus takes the mother to a torture chamber, where she is burned with hot coals, leaving Farnese in a state of shock. While having sex with a soldier, Luca finds out that none of the Holy Iron Chain Knights respect Farnese. With the pull of a curtain, Casca, or should I say Elaine, pokes her head into the tent. The man hands Luca her payment and an expensive necklace that she splits with the other prostitutes. Luca hands Nina some medicine, and Nina takes Casca to the river. Nina lifts her dress, where she bleeds profusely. She also notes the inside of her mouth is swollen. As the sun sets, evil spirits are drawn to Casca's brand of sacrifice. The demon child sees Casca, and Casca cries out to it, but Nina pulls her away. Farnese and Serpico talk to the Crowman and find out that all of Mosgus's disciples were saved by him to carry out God's will. When they encounter Mosgus, he is kneeling before the White Hawk statue, i.e. the Holy See, and he proceeds to smash his face and entire body into the stone ground. After performing this prostration 1,000 times, Mosgus tells Farnese the story of the sage and King Gaiseric. Farnese raises questions about spreading fear and impoverishing people's spirits, but Mosgus reiterates that thou shalt not question God's will. A boy named Joachim comes to Nina, and after getting upset with him, she tells him to come to the riverside by midnight. Nina gets Joachim to admit his love, so she grabs his hand and urges him to see the edge of the world with her. Nina takes Joachim to a pagan sex orgy, where fornication is as ubiquitous as the air you breathe. To become initiated, Joachim must kiss the leader's heart and penis, which looks like a snake, and drink from a bowl. The bowl, unfortunately, has a human finger and subsequently runs away. Luca walks in and physically punishes Nina for her abhorrent behavior. While walking Nina back home, Casca walks in on the orgy, and when she's stripped by one of the members, she screams, and evil spirits begin to infiltrate people's bodies. Before anything happens though, the demon child protects Casca and disappears into nothingness. Isidro, who's been tailing Guts, attempts to pilfer his sword, but it's simply too massive. Guts tells Isidro to scram, but then the dead bodies on the wagon wheels come along, and it's time for some more slashing and gashing. After Isidro breaks his sword, Guts tosses him down a hill. Guts then runs away for an entire day, attempting to reach the Tower of Conviction, before running into an old friend. Skull Knight and Guts seem to be converging on the same location, and it's possible the leader of the God Hand will be there as well. Skull Knight also reveals that every 1,000 years, someone in the divine realm is incarnated in the human world, and the revelation foretells a hawk of light. Essentially, the event imitates the eclipse. Skull Knight mentions that all events fall within the flow of causality. However, minute details cannot be predicted by the God Hand, and Skull Knight will attempt to exploit this to his advantage. Skull Knight leaves by saying, "Your lover will be left alone. It won't be as simple as catching 2 birds." Farnese gives the orders to burn 3 heretics at the stake. Serpico excuses himself and tells Jerome that his mother was burned at the stake before his eyes. Farnese recalls the first time she watched someone burn at the stake, and how she enjoyed throwing the torches into the fire. To assuage her guilt, Farnese proceeds to masturbate, but the feelings of guilt are too strong. Pepe, a prostitute under Luca, is bound up by knights of the Holy See. Luca backtalks the soldier, and the soldier readies his whip, but Guts catches it and crushes his face with his hand, asking where the woman is with the brand on her chest. Guts obliterates the guards, shocking everyone in sight. The soldiers eventually flee in fear, and Luca takes Guts to Casca. But when they arrive at the tent, Nina and Casca are gone. A group of heretics, who think Casca's a sorcerer, abduct the 2 girls. Joachim elucidates the location of the heretic hideout to the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Meanwhile, Isidro, who is at the entrance of the hideout, hears the heretics say they will cut out Nina's heart as an offering to the witch. Isidro distracts the cultist, while Puck goes to Guts. Casca's brand bleeds, and the evil spirits possess the cultist, while the Holy Iron Chain Knights enter the cave. Isidro saves Casca and Nina, while the goat-headed leader is possessed. The leader looks to mate with Casca, but Guts lunges in and creates a whirlwind of death. After 2 years, Guts and Casca look at each other, and damn if it's not epic. Farnese is alarmed at the presence of the Black Swordsman, but urges her soldiers to fight. While escaping, Guts clashes with the cultist leader, and even gets knocked to the ground. But Guts is unwavering in his mission, and thusly claims, "I'm taking her with me, this time for sure." After some nifty moves, Guts catches the leader and slices his head off. A pair of mysterious eyes watches Guts. Serpico corners Guts on a narrow ledge, and the two begin to fight each other. The advantage of this approach for Serpico is that because of Guts' right arm being pinned up against the wall, he isn't able to draw his massive sword. Furthermore, the sun is in Guts' eyes, and his heavy equipment is more of a hindrance than a help. Despite this, Guts catches Serpico's sword with his hand, crushes it, and points his bow at him. But Serpico's evasive moves allow him to escape the Black Swordsman, for now. Afterwards, Guts sees Casca being taken away by the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Guts heads to the Tower of Conviction as the mysterious eyes watch from the Holy See statue. While in a jail cell, the torturers take Nina through the torture chambers as she urinates in fear. Farnese is ordered to leave Albion by her father. Farnese then excoriates Serpico and blames him for snitching on her to the Vandamayan family, i.e. Farnese's family. In the torture chamber, Mosgus finds out that the witch, Casca, was venerated by the cultist, and when he sees the brand mark, he has her placed in an Iron Maiden. The blood on the spikes reacts to the brand, causing Casca to escape a gruesome death. Guts enters the Tower of Conviction, while the spirits in the torture chamber engulf the whole area. Guts asks Farnese where Casca is, and she reveals she's in the lower torture chamber. Luca, with the help of Jerome, saves Nina from her cell, but they quickly run into the evil spirits from the torture chamber. While Guts continues to search for Casca, the evil spirits enter Mosgus's prayer room, while the mysterious creature with eyes looks on in. The demon child protects Casca from the evil spirits as the mysterious being with eyes pokes Mosgus. "I have witnessed a miracle!" Holding Casca in his arms in front of Luca and friends, Mosgus claims he must burn the witch. The torturers attack while Luca and friends look to escape. Nina can't support Luca's weight and eventually drops her. But before hitting the ground, Skull Knight catches the girl and brings her to safety. Then he stares at the mysterious creature with eyes and tells him to show himself. Mosgus grows wings and tells Guts he will pay for his sins. Guts fights Mosgus' disciples, who all grow wings as well, and seems to have success, but they are stronger than first thought. Skull Knight initiates his battle with the mysterious being. It is then that Lucas sees a sight beyond words. The being recounts his life story by stating he was ostracized by society and was driven underground where corpses were tossed. Eventually, he met with the 5 angels, and he was transformed into the egg that will hatch the quote-unquote perfect world. He then divulges that he has been nudging critical events along to a desired time that is guided by a greater will, possibly the gears of fate. Skull Knight chases away the egg, but when he escapes with Luca, they see a giant egg. Guts struggles with Mosgus's disciples, but eventually blasts and cuts his way through. However, he does sustain critical damage in the process. Skull Knight notes the time is ripe for it to take form. The monsters destroy the base of the tower as everything begins to collapse. Amidst all the wreckage, the tower resembles the God Hand from the eclipse. Fires engulf the refugee camp to create the brand of sacrifice. Mosgus urges the people to erect a pillar of which they will use to burn the witch. The 4 members of the God Hand, save for Griffith, manifest via evil spirits in a semi-corporeal form. Casca is placed at the stake, while Guts desperately fights his way through the monsters. After releasing Luca, Skull Knight comes face to face with the immortal Zod. While slowly dying, the egg consumes the demon child and says, "Let us die together." The crowd screams for Casca's demise, but just as fire singes her clothes, Isidro pulls Casca to safety. "Thou shalt not!" screams Mosgus, as Guts pierces through the wall of monsters and lunges into Mosgus. The demon, that is the Black Swordsman, defeats the angel. Guts wonders why the demon child was in the egg and begins to reach for Casca, but then, swift is heaven's vengeance. Mosgus breathes a hell-like fire on Guts, but the Black Swordsman pushes his way through and jabs his sword in the Inquisitor's mouth. Nina, plagued with stress, falls off the tower into a merchant's shop. Guts and Mosgus continue their battle, but Guts is troubled with finding a weak spot on Mosgus's armored body. Mosgus batters Guts with God's pressure, but the Black Swordsman rams his sword through the Inquisitor's body, lifts him up into the air, and tosses his candied ass off the Tower of Conviction. The Holy See followers are consumed in darkness as Guts embraces Casca. As the people stampede away from the monsters, Luca saves Nina from being trampled. Guts and the gang make a fire to ward off the oncoming monsters. The situation looks insurmountable as the living dead form the semi-corporeal God Hand, and everyone is crying out for the desired to come. The demon child begins to transform into the Hawk of Light, the exalted phoenix who will bring peace upon the world. Day breaks, and Guts and the crew are all safe. Salat and the Bakiraka arrive to witness the Oracle, but attack Guts' crew instead. After fending them off, Zod bursts through the remnants of the tower and begins running in a mysterious fashion. Guts looks over his shoulder and notices the Skull Knight as he is pointing in the direction of the newly reincarnated Griffith. Everyone instinctively knows the desired has come. Zod bows down to his new master, while Guts begins to lose himself in rage. That is, until he remembers his vow to protect Casca. Salat orders the Bakiraka warrior clan to seize Griffith, but Zod tears them to shreds. Casca, drawn to the demon child body that Griffith inhabits, reaches out for the White Hawk. The Kushan army head toward Albion, while Zod flies Griffith away from the wreckage. Guts and Casca slice through the Kushan soldiers as they chase Griffith and the demonic creature. Farnese begins to question her own faith as she resigns from the Holy Iron Chain Knights and endeavors to follow Guts in his journey against the darkness. Nina leaves Luca and starts a life with Joachim, and Skull Knight notes that with the fissure, the shape of the world began to crumble. Zod flies over a dreamlike forest, while Guts and Casca return to Erica after she just said good morning to her father. Godo passed away shortly after Guts left last time, and Erica suggests that they should all live together from now on. Erica then mentions that Rickard has been talking to a silver-haired man on the Hill of Swords. Guts' rage unleashes at the sight of Griffith, but Rickard, unknowing to what Griffith did during the eclipse, stops Guts. Griffith notes his new body of flesh makes him free. Guts yells at Griffith for his lack of remorse, but Griffith says, "I'll not betray my dream." Guts swings his sword in rage, but Zod intervenes. The two go back and forth for a while, but it's clear Guts is on the defensive. However, Guts eventually lands a blow on the immortal creature, while Griffith contemplates his inner feelings that seem to originate within the demon child, which fused with his vessel. Zod transforms, giving Guts everything he can handle, and then some. Casca, sensing the presence of the demon child, approaches the hill. As Zod shatters a nearby rock, Griffith shields the former unit commander of the Hawk. Casca cries out as she senses the child within Griffith, but Griffith and Zod retreat, as Griffith reminds Guts what he truly desires. Griffith extends an invitation to Rickert to join his cause if he so desires. Meanwhile, Guts readies his bow, but again, Rickert stops him. After Griffith leaves, Guts tells Rickert everything about the eclipse, and Rickert insists on joining Guts on his vengeance trail, but Guts refuses. With the destruction of the Fairy Cove that Guts lived in briefly, Puck recommends that they go to his home, Elfhelm. For now, Guts and Casca leave Rickert and Erica. The Kushan army invade a midland town, while a young girl, Sonia, says, "The Hawk of Light is coming." Kushan General excoriates Salat and the Bakiraka for not catching the Hawk. An arrow aimed at the general is caught by Salat, as his 2 Tapasa guards eliminate the instigators. Salat returns to his mission of finding the Hawk, while Griffith casually rides into the village. Griffith swiftly kills the general, while Zod plows through a crowd of soldiers. The Moonlight Knight, Locus, offers his sword to Griffith, and helps Zod in demolishing the Kushans. Sonia approaches Griffith as the Tapasa lunge in, but they are pushed back by a cryptic being cloaked in black, wearing a 3-eyed mask. The man is Roxas, a Kushan exile, who vows to lop off Griffith's head. However, for the time being, he'll protect him until that day comes. A man in a dragon armor, Grunbeld, smashes his way through and eventually pledges his allegiance to the ever-growing Hawk. Meanwhile, a witch, who transfers her spirit to a bird, watches the affair and mentions how the Hawk of Darkness will usher in a new age of darkness. Farnese and Serpico follow the Black Swordsman, while Guts fends off some snow demons. Guts is having difficulties watching after Casca and not being reminded of her past self. The Beast of Darkness returns to Guts at the nighttime, goading him into killing Casca and pursuing Griffith instead. Guts wakes up and stabs the incubus on his shoulder. While fighting monsters, Guts is possessed and begins to strangle Casca. Afterwards, Casca grows wary of the Black Swordsman, forcing Guts to restrain her mobility with a leash. The emotional distance grows ever wider between the former lovers. As Guts naps, Casca escapes her bondage, but falls in the hands of 3 lustful soldiers, who strip her clothes off. Casca's muscle memory from her days with the Hawk kicks in, as she dispatches the 3 hastily. Upon seeing Casca's naked body, Guts' libido kicks in, and after dodging Casca's sword strike, he pins her down and forces his lips upon her. Casca resists, but the Beast of Darkness eggs him on to tear her to shreds. Guts pulls back before losing all control. Afterwards, Guts is visited by some familiar faces. Farnese then kneels in the presence of the Black Swordsman, requesting to accompany him on his travels. Isidro excoriates Farnese for nearly having Casca burned, and demands she grovel to prove her loyalty. Farnese cuts her hair, shocking Isidro. Guts then permits the unification, but warns there will be no more restful nights from here on. Lord Mule, a Midland nobleman, looks to enact vengeance on the Kushans who displaced the Midland royal families. One of the soldiers says the White Hawk is liberating Midland territories from the Kushan army. Lord Mule sees the Kushans rounding up Midland civilians and charges in with his regiment. Mule quickly discovers the Kushans are using Midland prisoners and not their own forces. The odds are not in Mule's favor, but reinforcements come in via Griffith's horde of demon soldiers, led by Zod. Sonia, who is a mind reader, communicates instructions to Griffith as he flies in through the enemy front and lops off the head of the Kushan leader. Following the battle, Sonia welcomes Mule to the Band of the Hawk. Mule is shocked to see Kushan warriors in the Hawk's camp, but Locus explains that the enemy warriors that survive 3 battles are given the choice of conciliation or death. Sonia and Mule make their way through Griffith's various war demons. Mule recognizes the towering Grunbeld, otherwise known as the Great Flame Dragon. Despite this, Mule thinks that Grunbeld died long ago in battle. Zod is the last demon they encounter before seeing Griffith, surrounded by dead souls. Griffith allows family members to say goodbye to their deceased loved ones before they go to a place where they all become one. Humbled by Griffith's mere presence, the mule offers his sword to Griffith and feels that his involvement with the hawk will be the stuff of legends. Meanwhile, Farnese is beginning to feel useless, as she is more of a hindrance than anything else. One day, she loses sight of Casca and ends up hiding in a tree all night. A shepherd gives Guts and the gang directions to Virtanis, a port by the sea that will allow them to reach Puck's homeland, Elfhelm. But with all the military activity, it's going to be dangerous, and they also need to avoid trolls on the way there. Guts continues training Isidro, and it looks like the young lad is making some progress. But Guts urges the lad to utilize his wits to think through battles, rather than coming in with a preset plan. Serpico tells Guts that if Farnese wishes to continue her adventure with the Black Swordsman, then he'll do his best to get along. However, if things go awry, Serpico will hash things out with his sword. A troll snatches Farnese and Casca, but Isidro stops it by chucking a rock at its head. The troll clenches its axe with fury as Isidro draws his sword, readying himself for a legitimate battle. The troll pushes Isidro around and eventually looks poised for the final blow. But a witch throws berries at its face and tells Isidro to take a look around. Surrounded by beastly trolls, the witch uses various magical spells to drive them away. Guts wonders if there could be an apostle in the area before they run into a man that was attacked by trolls. The man identifies as Morgan and is looking for a witch to save his village from the trolls. After crossing the witch's magical barrier, they arrive at a cryptic house with trees growing out of it. Just then, hordes of golems begin to converge on Guts and the gang, and the Black Swordsman does what he does best, slicing and dicing. The golems continue coming, until Serpico finds out that a miniature version of the golem must be destroyed to prevent it from regenerating. Shirka, the small witch, is told by her mistress to invite the new visitors into the house. The mistress, Flora, welcomes them into the mansion of the spirit tree, and acknowledges that Guts and Casca are both branded, and she's been waiting for their arrival. Flora and Guts strike a verbal deal that if Guts helps Shirka in protecting Morgan's village, she'll produce a talisman that will weaken the effects of the brand of sacrifice. During dinner, Flora elaborates on the astral world being like the afterlife. Shirka expands on this by saying that the astral world is the world of spirits, and that the other is the origin of all existence, the world of idea. And as one descends deeper in the astral world, there may even exist a place of heaven and hell. Guts shows Flora a behelit, and the witch claims that it links the lower levels of the astral world to the physical. She then says Guts' malice, which has kept him alive to this point, is also a shackle that threatens those closest to him. Flora then says that the members of the God Hand were once human, and now execute the will of something lurking in the abyss of the astral realm. Shirka tells Flora that Guts is foolish for opposing the transcendental entities, especially if that being is the Hawk, the Absolute. Flora advises Shirka to be more open-minded about fate, for it may be her destiny to aid the struggler on his journey. Shirka draws the talisman on Guts' brand and gives everyone a magical fetish to fend off the ethereal beings, like the trolls. Serpico receives a wind cloak and sword. Isidro receives a salamander dagger, which has fire elementals, and Casca and Farnese receive silver chain shirts, while Farnese also gets a silver knife. Flora sees them off. Shortly after, she has a cryptic conversation with the Skull Knight, who seems to know her quite well. Trolls attack the village of Enoch as Morgan returns during a funeral. Morgan shows Shirka to the villagers, but they are skeptical that a mere child can help them. The village priest reinforces their doubts and even claims that witches are symbols of wickedness. Despite this, Guts secures lodging for his companions. Shirka offers everyone a piece of her hair to tie around their finger, so that they can communicate with one another through thought transference. Shirka assumes the leadership position in the future battle, but it angers Isidro. Fuming, Isidro goes to the river to swing his sword. He then encounters Morgan, and the old man tells the boy how witches saved his mother from the brink of death. Guts saves Shirka from some boys throwing rocks at her. Shirka then tells Guts that the Holy See built this church in Enoch on holy land, and have thus tarnished the area for political power. In addition, because of the Holy See's influence, the villagers of Enoch drove Flora away from this area long ago. Hence, Shirka despises them. Just then, a small army of trolls rushes into the village, as the villagers seek safety in the church. Serpico uses his magical fetish to slice the heads off 2 trolls. The sheer number of repulsive creatures forces them to run, until Casca trips and Farnese shields her with her body. Serpico defends the 2 and is shocked to see Farnese put someone else's life before her own. Guts walks in and slices multiple trolls at once. The townsfolk are impressed with Guts' performance, as Shirka remarks, "He is superhuman." Shirka announces that she will use magic to extend the bulwark, i.e. the defensive barrier around the church, and uses thought transference to ask the 3 guys to buy some time. The priest, outraged with Shirka's wicked behavior, commands her to cease her activity. It is then that Farnese draws a parallel between the priest's behavior and her own as the leader of the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Farnese stops the priest as Shirka performs her incantation. The villagers enter the church, only to see the trolls already inside. Guts continues fending off the trolls as Serpico and Isidro go in the church. Trolls surround Casca in the church as Farnese does her best to ward them off. Isidro ends up in a compromised position, but is saved by Morgan. Shirka summons the lords of the east, west, south, and north to protect the church. The magic that pervades the land incinerates the trolls, heals up Morgan's wounds, and repels all spiritual beings that would bring harm. Shirka enlightens the priest by stating that she has built a shrine in her heart to communicate with the spiritual beings. A large ogre makes its presence known, and although it cannot cross Shirka's barrier, it can throw physical objects in and cause severe damage. Shirka asks for more time to use her magic, so Guts takes on the responsibility of fighting off the ogre by himself. Water begins to descend on the town as a Kelpie walks in on the affair. Given their current predicament, Serpico decides to help Guts with the Kelpie to buy Shirka more time. Guts and Serpico fight their respective monsters as Shirka enters deeper in the astral realm and eventually sees a magical sanctuary that existed before the church. Serpico has trouble with the Kelpie as it begins to drown him. After escaping, Serpico gains the upper hand and cuts the Kelpie's left eye out. Shirka becomes one with the water spirit in Enoch and summons a deluge to wash away the spirits. Despite her success, Shirka's alignment with the water spirit becomes too strong, and if she does not return to her physical body, the floods will continue. Furthermore, if someone attempts to jar her awake, her spiritual body may never return, leaving her a vegetable. Farnese attempts to bring her back nonetheless, but bumps Casca off the roof of the church. Isidro snaps Shirka out of her trance, but the crew can't seem to find Casca or Farnese. Shirka uses her ability to determine the location of the 2 missing girls. The townsfolk, along with the priest, offer their thanks for Shirka's services. Morgan, who can see that Isidro is down on himself, offers him a sword that will be easy for him to handle in battle. Serpico, who is injured in battle, tells Guts that he is leaving Lady Farnese in his hands. Guts, Shirka, and Isidro enter the troll cave to find the girls, but see a weird creature lingering about. Shirka says this is a sign that they are in Quithoth, the dark domain of the spirit realm. Shirka notes the irregularity of the spiritual and physical worlds overlapping like this, and says, "The world will undergo a transfiguration. No, perhaps that has already begun, along with the appearance of a certain man." Shirka wakes up Farnese and Casca through thought transference, and the 2 girls soon realize the gravity of their situation. Farnese keeps Casca close as they notice a group of trolls raping and mutilating human women. The trolls surround the 2 girls as Farnese ineffectively attempts to scare them off. Guts shoots his revolving bow and kills the group of trolls. Shirka announces they've come to save the girls. Guts tells Isidro to protect the women as he prepares for another battle with the hairy monsters. Guts easily dispatches the droves of trolls as Shirka and the gang get cornered. In an instant, the trolls are slaughtered and a gust of wind streams past them. In the wreckage, a weird feeling consumes Guts. Casca and Guts' brands bleed profusely as the troll's intestines begin to manifest in the form of Slan from the God Hand. Guts attacks, but the female God Hand member pulls him in. Due to the ominous energy flow, Shirka decides to set up a magical barrier outside the cave to prevent the trolls and other evil entities from escaping. Due to Slan's mere presence, Guts' brand is eliciting immense pain. Things are dire until Skull Knight steps in and prepares for his grisly battle. Shirka's ethereal body enters the darkness as Skull Knight slashes his way to Guts, but Guts blows a hole into Slan that she seems to enjoy very much. Skull Knight urges Guts to impale her, but when he does, she becomes lustful and even kisses the Black Swordsman. Slan's troll intestine body disintegrates as Shirka possesses a god of the rotting roots that transforms the trolls into food for maggots. The crumbling cave blocks Guts' escape. That's when the Skull Knight pulls a sword from inside his body that was forged via eating behemoths. He names the weapon the Sword of Actuation. Skull Knight cleaves through space to escape the demonic realm. Before leaving though, Shirka recognizes the knight. After their triumphant return to Enoch, Guts looks back at the gang, thinking to himself that he's found a new group of companions. Back at the mansion of the Spirit Tree, Flora places a talisman on a magical suit of armor. Skull Knight warns Flora about the dangers of the armor, while monsters break through the magical barrier. After Guts passes out from battle exhaustion, Shirka mentions how the wounds to his ethereal body have not healed. Shirka senses the forest barrier vanishing as Guts' brand begins to bleed. They reach the mansion and the house has become a blazing inferno. Guts clashes with the monsters. Skull Knight makes his presence known and tells Guts he has a close tie to the owner of the mansion. Zod walks in on the affair and confirms his master to be the fifth angel. Grunbeld, a giant man, challenges the Black Swordsman to singles combat. Shirka weeps for her missing master, but Flora uses her thought transference to communicate her final message, to get the black magical armor to Guts. Grunbeld pounds and clobbers Guts, breaking ribs in the process. Zod transforms and confronts a Skull Knight for another battle. After defeating some apostles, Shirka leads the crew to the basement where the dangerous black suit of armor resides. Grunbeld crushes Guts with his massive foot. This lacks. After Guts insults the monster, Grunbeld pulls out his cannon and fires away. Shirka uses the golems to create a protective barrier around Guts. Through mind transference, Guts sees the black armor and runs into the mansion. The wounds take their toll on Guts as he collapses onto the ground. The crew helps Guts put on the magical armor, giving the Black Swordsman a boost of energy he's never quite experienced. Zod stares in awe and speaks in an ominous tone. So, you would have him follow you down the same path into hell. Guts begins to acknowledge the monstrous spirit that is seething within him. Guts' speed, power, and reflexes are on a whole nother level. Guts destroys Grunbeld's shield, making the Dragon Warrior wonder if this is the same man from earlier. Shirka mentions that the black Berserker armor allows Guts to fight without pain, thereby permitting him to exceed the limits of the human body. Grunbeld swings down at the Black Swordsman, but Guts slices the Warhammer and gashes into his shoulder. Grunbeld's had enough and transforms into his apostle form. Because of the Berserker armor, Guts' limbs are contorted and recontorted through the armor's magical effects. Shirka mentions that the previous owner was devoured by its steel teeth. Unsure what to do, Flora advises Shirka to guide Guts through the turbulence of power to prevent him from being consumed by it. Isidro notes that Guts' fighting style is more animalistic than human. Shirka then enters the ethereal realm and navigates her way through the firestorm that is Guts' anger. As she descends deeper into Guts' psyche, various memories float by until she reaches an abyss of terrifying darkness. Shirka eventually encounters her mistress's talisman and a brief light mirroring Guts' physical form, i.e. Guts' ego. Shirka uses her magic to show Guts Casca. Just then, Guts' ethereal body takes a familiar form, and his physical body snaps out of the trance. Guts lunges through a slew of monsters to come to Casca and Farnese's aid, but the fellow branded one is still apprehensive. Flora's ethereal body takes on a heavenly glow as she instructs her most precious protege, Shirka, to leave the nest and follow her own path. Guts grabs Shirka and begins to run as the broken-hearted student says goodbye to her caring master. Laban and the Arklow Knights arrive in Windham, a city reduced to a dreadful demon city, overflowing with corpses. women are being marched into the castle to be used for an unknown Kushan ritual. Despite this, Princess Charlotte, who's in the highest level of the Tower of Rebirth, is still alive. The hooded man telling Laban all of this reveals himself to be Foss, and he asks, "Where is the hawk?" Just then, Kushan-controlled monsters attack the Arklow Knights. The former Midland higher-ups get trapped by monsters, but a man with a bow, Irvine, takes them down. Locus approaches and tells the men that the hawk will return to alleviate the ills of the city via a tempest. Ganishka, the Kushan emperor, castigates Salat for failing to capture the Hawk of Oracle and curtails his assignment to reconnaissance. Angered by his reduced role, Salat tells the Tapasa that Ganishka is a dread emperor. Ganishka visits Charlotte and asks if she's prepared to bear a child. Ganishka peeks through Charlotte's bed curtains, and the young princess has a traumatic flashback of when her father tried to grope her. Ganishka notices the hawk embroidery around the room and starts to contemplate evil thoughts. Ganishka then claims, "I'll reign over this unclean world as a demon king and rebel against God." Roxas easily sneaks up on Salat and the Bakiraka as the Band of the Hawk blitzes into Windham. Locus and Irvine annihilate the Kushan human soldiers, forcing Ganishka to call upon the Daka, demon-like soldiers, to defend the castle. Locus queries the Demon King, "Why do you oppose the master?" Enraged by their insolence, Ganishka proclaims, "No! With my own demon-drenched hands, I will take and desecrate God." Locus decapitates numerous Daka with one swift move, impressing Ganishka. Irvine aims his bow toward the Emperor, but the arrow goes straight through his body. Impertinence. In his apostle form, Ganishka displays his shocking power to the Band of the Hawk and commands them to surrender to his will. A gust of wind pervades Charlotte's room as Griffith appears before the surprised princess. Griffith kisses Charlotte's bleeding fingers as the princess falls into the hawk's warm embrace. Charlotte tells Anna, her servant, to hang on to her bed as the ceiling begins to crumble. Locus instructs his forces to withdraw, as Ganishka wonders why they are retreating all of the sudden. Ganishka inspects the Tower of Rebirth and notices that the princess is missing as she flies away into the night, with Griffith and Zod's assistance. Guts and the gang reach the sea. Shirka recalls their last battle and remarks, "No matter how robust Guts is, if a mere human is to exchange blows with those monsters, for that, he must, as a human, become a monster." As they rest up for the night and eat their dinner, Farnese requests that Shirka teach her how to use magic. Shirka warns the eager girl that she may be past the age of learning such things, but agrees to teach her nonetheless. Shirka and Guts walk along the beachfront, discussing their new journey and how the young witch is still mourning the loss of her master. Skull Knight walks in and warns Guts about the dangers of the Berserker armor, but Shirka proclaims that she won't allow that to happen. Shirka then deduces that the Skull Knight once wore the Berserker armor himself, which Skull Knight confirms. Skull Knight foretells future battles with the Hawk's apostles, and claims that at the Land of Elves, Elfhelm, King Hanafubuki may be able to recover Casca's mind. Guts is pleased with this news, but Skull Knight warns Guts, "There's no guarantee your wish will be her wish." Casca finds a mysterious dark-haired boy in the moonlight, and her maternal instincts kick in. As they decide to head in, a cryptic shadow lurks in the darkness. The Moonlight Child plays with Guts' armor and begins to fall towards sharp knives. Guts and Casca catch the child, looking like a family in the process. As the gang goes to sleep, an unwelcome visitor opens the door. Guts takes down the fearsome creature, but a whole swarm bears down on them. Serpico and Isidro get in on the action, while Guts slices multiple monsters at once. Shirka produces a magical field to protect the cabin. She then instructs the crew to find the spellcaster, who is manipulating the monsters. Serpico destroys the Kushans controlling the monsters, but they were also being controlled. Afterward, the monster manipulator takes hold of a massive demonic beast. Serpico jumps in, but is forced back quite easily by a stream of water. Shirka determines the spellcaster controlling this beast is at sea. After the monster battles Guts, the Berserker armor envelops his body, leading him to gash the monster. Guts continues cutting the monster to pieces as the armor consumes his flesh and blood. Guts falls deeper into the darkness, losing himself and becoming more beast than man. Losing sight of all rationality, just like Skull Knight said, Guts lunges towards his friends as a luminous spirit blocks his path. The spirit touches Guts, allowing him to see Shirka's ethereal body and reach out for it. After narrowly being consumed by the darkness, Guts and the gang notice the Moonlight Boy is missing. On a Kushan ship, Master Daiba's army of Pashaka succeeded in their mission of subjugation, but the mysterious man wonders how one group of individuals survived the attack. Guts and the gang arrive in Vritannis, a garrison fortress of the Holy See. After Isidro knocks Shirka's hat down, resulting in it being crushed by a cart, the witch ventures off on her own, until she sees a dark, cryptic being floating in the air. Shirka walks in on an area with numerous hanged individuals. After finding out they were Kushan slaves, she orders the men to cremate the bodies. While looking for Shirka, Mule inquires Isidro about the whereabouts of the witch. While moping on a shipping dock, Shirka is approached by Sonia, who recognizes her immediately as a witch. Sonia uses an analogy about birds to describe her situation with the Band of the Hawk. As the two get up to leave, they notice some pirates chasing Kushan children, who they plan to use as slaves. Shirka uses her magic to freeze the men, but Isidro, not wanting the men to figure out that she's a witch, distracts them with his usual tactics. Mule eventually enters the arena and cuts the pirates down. Enraged by this, the pirate boss descends upon them and defeats Mule in singles combat. Isidro lunges in to save Mule, but he doesn't last long. Fortunately though, a knight was woken up and ferociously attacks the pirates while Mule saves the slave children. Sonia invites Shirka to join her on her travels, but with one look at Guts, the witch declines the offer. Before leaving, Sonia warns Shirka to flee the city. Just then, Shirka sees a vision of events that will befall Vritannis. Shirka then changes her normal attire to avoid suspicion that she's a witch. Back at the Hawks encampment, Princess Charlotte bakes Griffith some sweets, but Sonia, who has a crush on Griffith, intervenes. Mule pulls Sonia away to allow Griffith and Charlotte some private time. Unhappy with the situation, however, Sonia walks away and has a brief conversation with Irvine before falling asleep. Farnese begins her magic training by tangibly visualizing an apple in her mind, which is the first step in attaining her luminous body. Unable to secure a ship for traveling to Elfhelm, Farnese suggests an idea. She later arrives at the Vandemayan household, only to be castigated by her father for dereliction in her duty as the leader of the Holy Iron Chain Knights. He asserts that her actions will be judged by the Holy City's Court Supreme, and that she is to abide quietly in the mansion. Farnese feebly attempts to ask for a ship for her friends, but can't get the words out. After a bath, Farnese is approached by Magnifico, her older brother, who empathizes with her, as he was also slighted by the Vandemayan head. Farnese tells Magnifico her plan of asking father for a ship, but her older brother reassures her that he could procure one for her. That is, given a request. Serpico returns and gives the good news that a ship has been arranged, but Farnese will not be rejoining them. Serpico returns all the magical fetishes and abruptly leaves with no further explanation. Puck and Ivalera sneak into the Vandemayan mansion, under the instruction of Guts, to spy on Farnese. Magnifico introduces Farnese to Roderick, an officer of the Navy, who is to be her fiancé. The two elves report the news to Guts, and after Casca drops the deed to the ship in the fire, Guts decides it's time to retrieve Farnese. Farnese continues her visualization training on her own. She then tells Serpico how she's a fool and a coward for running back home. Lady Vandemayan, Farnese's mother, tells her daughter that the head of the Vandemayan fears her rambunctious hellstorm of a daughter, chiefly because he cannot control her. Guts and the crew approach the Vandemayan estate as an aristocratic carriage goes by with Lady Farnese inside. A ball is held shortly after, with many foreign dignitaries there, attempting to curry favor with the Vandemayan Bank, who is the main financial backer of numerous nations. Magnifico and Roderick both bemoan their respective fathers' close-mindedness and lack of forethought in thinking beyond their limited domains. Roderick then takes Farnese to dance, as Magnifico is shocked to see his own mother at the party. Lady Vandemayan warns Magnifico about his sister and moves her way to Serpico. She recognizes him from 10 years ago and remarks that he must be warped to have stayed with her daughter for so long. Guts and the gang slip past the guards to enter the ball, but fog and monsters begin to pervade the area. Shirka talks to Serpico through mind transference, and when they meet up with him, Serpico tells the gang that they cannot see Lady Farnese, and he thusly challenges Guts to a duel. The layout of the room has numerous pillars, which slows down Guts' sword enough to allow Serpico to dodge. Serpico continues to narrowly dodge Guts' strikes, as he reminisces about his time with the Black Swordsman, and how it changed him. Serpico reaches the last pillar, and Guts smashes it, but the stones begin to descend upon the Black Swordsman's head. This is Serpico's chance, but the Black Swordsman blocks the stones with his sword, and clubs Serpico over the head. After the duel, Shirka announces that the monsters at the ball are similar to the familiars on the beach. The crew prepares for battle as Shirka returns Serpico's magical fetishes. Lord Vandemayan proposes a toast to the various dignitaries, who will soon engage in a holy war. Magnifico interjects, announcing the marriage of Roderick and Farnese. There's just one problem. Farnese is missing. A window is smashed open, and a massive tiger monster slashes some noblemen. The party guests run in fear, but the exits are all blocked. Farnese uses fire to ward off the beast. Looks like the party's in full swing. Guts wastes no time in slicing the tiger down the middle, shocking everyone. Serpico brings Farnese to her old companions, pleasing Casca immensely. Guts says they should leave, but Farnese begs for him to protect her family, to which Guts grudgingly obliges. Shirka unleashes some thorn snakes and gives Farnese a ring in which she can control them to her will. Roderick attempts to help, but is ineffective. Farnese urges him to use a silver weapon against the monsters. Serpico dispatches the spellcasters controlling the tigers, and Shirka bounds the monsters with her magic. Guts then queries Farnese if this is her last stop on her journey, but it looks like her journey is just beginning. Lord Vandemayan displays his gratitude to his saviors, but just then, the apostle form of Ganishka rears its ugly head and gives a fierce warning. The illusions that you saw, know this, that they are the start of a nightmare without end this evening. Monsters begin burning and destroying the city from every direction. Roderick offers his boat and services to Guts for the journey to Elfhelm, in an attempt to prove himself worthy of Farnese's hand. Farnese tacitly says goodbye to her parents as they leave the party. Guts runs into Owen, the former leader of the Midland Tomel Knights, who immediately recognizes the Raiders captain of the Band of the Hawk. Owen inquires about Griffith, but Guts walks away, acting as if he knows nothing. We then move over to the current pontiff, who is in a dreadful physical and psychological state, merely waiting for death to come. A divine dream with a hawk enraptures the pontiff. Upon waking, Sonia and Mule greet his holiness and request he comes to meet their lord. The pontiff agrees without hesitation. Upon hearing the dreadful news from Virtanis, the pontiff feels that this is a sign of a revelation. Guts and the gang do their best to defend Virtanis from the monsters. Fires rage through the city as Guts and the crew are surrounded by horrible creatures. Serpico and Isidro take care of the smaller monsters, while Guts fights with the behemoth. After taking care of business, Guts urges his companions to leave at once. Shirka senses a slew of monsters infesting the harbor. Guts prepares to use his berserker armor and tap into the Beast of Darkness energy, disturbing Shirka greatly. Although she's having difficulty sensing ethereal beings, Shirka picks up on a lead in the flames engulfing the city. In the ethereal realm, Shirka navigates through a hellfire that is similar to purgatory. Guts slices through the horde of Daka as the Beast of Darkness ascends ever higher. Just then, Shirka embodies the Wheel of Flame's spirit, and thusly incinerates the Daka to mere embers. Exhausted from her magical spell, Shirka is carried by Guts as they look for a boat to escape on. Just then, multiple Makara emerge from the water to block their path. With no other options, Guts allows the Beast of Darkness to take over as Shirka mistakenly hangs on with her ethereal body. Guts slaughters the Makara as Shirka stares on from the inside of Guts' armor with awe. The battle takes a massive toll on Guts' body, especially when the Makara pierces his armor. However, he defeats them nonetheless. As Guts recovers, a colossal galleass comes forth. Daiba floats above the deck as he inspects the swordsman who killed his Makara. Shirka notices that Daiba can utilize magic, as Daiba makes the same assessment about his new foes. Daiba implores Guts to come at him. Guts blitzes in, but Daiba creates a water spout that ensnares the black swordsman. Shirka aids Guts in seeing past the Beast of Darkness field of vision, which allows him to regain his composure and control his landing. Guts dodges the numerous water spouts and deflects another one that was heading towards his companions. To the surprise of his friends, it would seem Guts has tempered the Beast of Darkness within, thanks to Shirka's help. Guts asks for Serpico's assistance as the black swordsman cuts Daiba's water spout. Daiba powers up, but Isidro throws an explosive at his side. Daiba then summons the Kundalini Water Serpent, his most powerful creature. Shirka warns Guts that the Kundalini may be on the level of a polytheistic god. Shirka identifies the true body of the Kundalini, and Guts makes it his mission to cut it. But to do so, he'll need Shirka to call upon the Wheel of Flame Spirit for assistance. Guts lunges into the Kundalini's head and utilizes the burst of flame to blow the serpent apart. Daiba looks to escape on his Garuda, but then the Emperor interjects. "You've blundered, Daiba! Not only did you lose most of the Makara, but the Kundalini was slaughtered!" Ganishka shocks Daiba and tells him to fall back. Ganishka then says, "Are you the follower of my arch-enemy, the Hawk?" Ganishka eventually shocks Guts with lightning, as Shirka is displaced from the armor. Despite the intense damage, Guts presses on, surprising Ganishka. Ganishka finds out Guts is branded and queries, "Wilt thou become a follower of mine?" Guts respects Ganishka's disobedience to the God Hand, yet he turns down the Emperor nonetheless. Ganishka plans to smite Guts, but then notices Zod in the distance, making his grand entrance. "The insects that have swarmed to the Hawk of Light have come." Ganishka scorches numerous flying monsters. Zod captures Ganishka's attention by roaring. He then attacks with all his might, but can't get close due to the lightning. The damage takes its toll on Zod as he crashes into Guts. Guts clenches onto Zod's back as the Apostle emerges from the water. Zod and Guts come to an understanding, a temporary alliance if you will, even though Zod is skeptical that one can take down the Emperor. Zod and Guts harness their collective strength to pierce through the brow of Ganishka, leaving his physical body scarred and scalding. Zod and Guts' bodies are steaming from the electrical currents they flew through. Zod demands Guts to stand up afterwards so they can settle their score. Nevertheless, Zod decides to wait for a better moment, and even crushes the neck of one of his allies who wishes to dispatch the Black Swordsman here and now. Guts presses on about Griffith's location, but Serpico dissuades the idea. Guts eventually passes out, but as he and his friends escape on a rowboat, he sees Griffith in the distance. The Kushan send an overwhelming military force to Virtanis, with the Emperor ordering a purge of the Holy See Alliance armies. Things look dismal until Irvine begins taking the heads off of multiple soldiers with his bow. Ganishka begins to worry about the presence of the Hawk. In the distance, Griffith looks poised to ingratiate himself into the battle. Griffith's lancers pierce through the enemy barrier as Zod gashes his way in. The Hawk easily cuts through 200,000 Kushan soldiers, with Griffith leading the charge. The Hawk swiftly surrounds the Emperor's mobile palace, with Griffith gracefully entering and confronting the tyrant. "This is the Hawk. I'm trembling. I, the ruler of the greatest empire of this world!" Ganishka gets mad at the Hawk's mere presence. Griffith attempts to touch the Emperor, but Ganishka reverts to his apostle form. I am the Kushan Emperor, supreme ruler and devastator of the world. Griffith's men topple the palace as a gust of wind pierces Ganishka's face. Under the immense force of the wind, Ganishka deteriorates to his human form. An inescapable dread consumes the Emperor. Griffith proposes that the two meet in the royal capital for their showdown. Ganishka, henceforth, retreats his forces, as the Hawk claims a moral victory. Griffith, the savior, enters Virtanis, tells Lord Vandemayan, "We are the Band of the Hawk, the Midland Liberation Army, under direct control of the royal house. As the sole army of Midland, everyone who sets foot in their kingdom shall obey Griffith's orders." The aristocrats take umbrage with Griffith's words until Princess Charlotte reveals herself, claiming, "Sir Griffith, my betrothed and leader of the Band of the Hawk, has been designated Supreme Commander of the Midland Regular Army." Lord Vandemayan recognizes Griffith as a hero and thus has the right to command other forces in his kingdom. However, the battle with the Kushans is steeped in religious values, making it a war with the Holy See itself, and not just Midland. The pontiff's luxurious carriage breaks the conversation as the frail old man surprises everyone via prostrating in front of Griffith, similar to how Mosgus prostrated in reverence of the Holy See statue. The pontiff then announces, "The Hawk of Light you see here is our savior!" The crowd of men then exalt their new leader, Griffith. Roderick's ship, the Seahorse, has long set sail with Guts and the crew all aboard. In the lower decks, Farnese's luminous body enters the astral world for the first time. Shirka grabs Farnese's hand and shows her a sight beyond words above the ship. Guts placidly stares at Casca until his vision begins to fade to black, just as Skull Knight foretold. Roderick steps in and inquires about Casca's significance to the Black Swordsman. Just as he's answering, Farnese returns to her physical body, not wanting to know Guts' response. Casca climbs onto the boat's bowsprit, and although Guts attempts to grab her, she falls into the water. Guts lunges in to save Casca, but his prosthetic arm weighs him down into the depths of the water. As he begins to sink, he reminisces about Casca's bad happenings near water. Roderick saves the Black Swordsman, as Shirka redraws Guts' talisman. Guts then subtly analogizes replacing his arm with a prosthetic and reviving Casca's mind, in the sense that you can replace what was lost, but you can't get back what you once had. After drawing the talisman, Shirka runs through Guts' words to Roderick about Casca. But even if he loves her and not Shirka, Shirka already has a special bond that no one else shares. Armed merchants head towards Roderick's ship as he instructs everyone to their battle stations. The pirates that harassed Isidro and Virtanis raise their skull and bones flag, but Roderick blows them to shreds with his many cannons. Roderick continues to outmaneuver the foolhardy pirate captain, Bonebeard, and it forces him to eventually withdraw. Guts then struggles with a fever as the Beast of Darkness resists the chains that Shirka placed on him through the talisman. "Don't think you can bind me with your yoke. May we run rampant with hatred and wild joy, just to crush with these fangs the true light that burns us." Guts awakens and the crew heads upstairs to celebrate their victory over the pirates. Magnifico tells Roderick that Skellig Island, i.e. the legendary island of elves, will be conquered for financial gain. Roderick tacitly declines this offer and makes his way to Farnese on the Crow's Nest. Although Farnese still feels useless, Roderick reassures her that she is valuable for watching over Casca, Guts' most prized possession. Faust is pleased to hear that Griffith has come back to his former glory. Laban tells everyone that Princess Charlotte is alive and with the Band of the Hawk. Children tell Laban that they've all had the same dream about the shining bird and must all leave the city at once, for the true dawn is coming. Despite his poor health, the pontiff claims his destiny is to place the king's crown on Griffith's head. The gap between Griffith and Ganishka's powers is insurmountable for the Emperor. "I have no choice but to transcend apostlehood." Ganishka is lowered into a mass of sewn-together apostles to surpass his limitations. Daiba states he made this vessel himself, a man-made behelit, if you will, with the Emperor submerging his reincarnated body inside the vessel. From the bowels of the astral world will something unbelievably sinister come about. With the fog gone, Laban urges the inhabitants to head toward the cathedral. Laban and his men enter the Windham Castle and encounter women prisoners, whom they intend to rescue. Upon reaching Foss and the others, Laban instructs everyone to dress up as Kushan soldiers to escape Windham. Upon escaping, the Kushan guards question Laban's name and affiliation. Though he's in trouble for the moment, a Kushan horseman by the name of Jarif covers for him and reveals he's part of the Band of the Hawk espionage division. Salat and the Bakiraka stymie Laban's advance, calling Jarif a traitor. Jarif, unfazed, reveals Salat's intentions to return to the land of his birth and establish a foothold in the Imperial Army. Henceforth, Jarif offers Salat a position in the Band of the Hawk. Salat is skeptical, but Jarif claims the Hawk will bring about a new world, one no one has ever seen. Salat has no reasonable refutation, but queries, is it right to yield oneself to something inscrutable? Salat vows to watch from the sidelines for now. Afterwards, Laban meets up with Owen after safely traversing the Kushan encampment and sees his new leader in the distance. Daiba runs in terror from the transformed Emperor. In the infernal abyss, I obtained it. Power. The demon Emperor obliterates Windham in the blink of an eye. Daiba claims, it's overflowing. Hell is overflowing. Ganishka draws the attention of everyone in the surrounding area as he transforms into an obelisk-like monster with large tentacles. The reason of the world ends now. Farnese and Shirka continue their training until the witch senses the ominous presence. Gut sees the behelit reconfigure its face and wonders what's happening. Shirka then remarks, it's just like the world is tearing apart. Ganishka's body is a sight beyond words. He begins walking forward, crushing everything beneath his massive feet. The Pontiff claims Ganishka, the embodiment of darkness, will be driven away by the Hawk of Light. The dark energy swirling around the Demon Emperor is a hellstorm. Daiba attempts to reason with Ganishka, but the Emperor can think of nothing else but killing others. Daiba concludes that Ganishka is Shiva, the one who destroys the world with fire. In the Emperor's delirium, he calls out for Daiba, but only sees a blinding light approaching. The Kushan soldiers crushed by Ganishka are transformed into Ganishka-like clones. Griffith orders his soldiers to assume the echelon formation, while commanding Sonia and Mule to stay with the Pontiff and Charlotte. Griffith orders the war demons to engage the spawned versions of Ganishka. The war demons assume their apostle forms and bombard their way through the barrage of monsters. The citizens of Midland and Salat's Bakiraka can only stare on in horror. People begin to speculate that Griffith, the leader of the demons, is one himself. Sonia angrily interjects, saying it matters not if one is human or demon. What's important is if they follow the Hawk. Sonia charges into a monster, but Irvine takes care of business before she hurts herself. Griffith mentions that the war demons are mighty, but for them to win the battle, he'll need the cooperation of all the soldiers. Cannons, crossbows, and cavalry attack the monsters on Griffith's command. Demons and men work side by side to demolish the Kushan monsters. Daiba is perplexed why apostles are so willing to fight alongside humans. The Pontiff merely stares on, contemplating the unknown and how it compels humans to make irrational decisions. Griffith leads the charge toward Ganishka. Zod then escorts the Hawk to the upper levels of Ganishka's cranium. Unknown to both Griffith and Zod, Roxas is concealed in the Immortal's left wing. During this period, Ganishka goes through a series of flashbacks about the significant events in his life. At 6 years old, he was poisoned by his mother, so his younger brother could assume the throne. As retaliation, Ganishka murders his brother while he sleeps, and as a result, his mother jumps to her death. Ganishka then survives the numerous attempts at his life from the well-placed aristocrats, and this arduous journey begins to take a toll on the Emperor, causing Ganishka to be overwhelmed with fears of being assassinated. Therefore, he devotes himself to war and conquering the world. Upon returning to the palace for a banquet, Ganishka was poisoned by his now grown-up son, and in desperation, the Emperor clutched his behelit and was given a second chance at life as an apostle. Ganishka opens his eyes to a blinding light and says, "You can see, because he who bears light exists in the deepest shadow." The sword of actuation cleaves a portal to Femto's position as the Skull Knight swings his sword toward the fifth member of the God Hand. Zod attempts to smash Skull Knight, but Griffith interjects. "I was waiting for you. The one who targets the God Hand at temporal juncture points. The Knight of Skeleton." Griffith distorted space to avoid Skull Knight's sword, and with this miss, a door to a deeper spiritual world had opened. A blinding light consumes the Ganishka obelisk and emanates throughout the land. The light even reaches Roderick's seahorse, and Guts' ethereal body is impacted profoundly. With this cataclysmic event, light envelops the entire world. Just then, a Hydra emerges from a forest as harpies fly near it. Monsters begin sprouting up from all corners of the world, astonishing everyone. It is thusly dubbed a new age of mankind's desire, Fantasia. The God Hand manifests in the physical world, as a massive white tree stands where Ganishka once was. Everyone intrinsically understands the importance of the world spiral tree, staring in bated breath. A new city springs up from where Ganishka once was, proving you can truly build Rome in a day. The Pontiff dubs the city Falconia after their new leader, Griffith. Griffith then returns in his human form on top of Zod, directing everyone to the entrance of the city. Back at sea, Bonebeard plans to exact his revenge on Roderick, but his crew is scared of Ghost in the area. Roderick acknowledges the same pirate ship chasing him down. Casca's brand bleeds, as Shirka states the pirates are something other than human. Roderick fires upon the ship, but it dives below the surface to avoid damage. Roderick claims that it must be a ghost ship of legend. The ship resurfaces, and Bonebeard quickly recognizes Isidro and the Angered Knight from Virtanis. Bonebeard claims he's not human, and unleashes multiple tentacle monsters on Roderick's ship. "Eat up, me hearties!" Guts enters the fray to slice up multiple monsters. "Tell me, are these things edible?" Guts cuts up the monsters without even breaking a sweat. "The main dish is starting now." Bonebeard claims Guts merely destroyed the large sea monster's whiskers, but with an innovative trick with his cannon, Guts smashes the monster down as Roderick fires upon the pirate ship. The sun begins to rise, so the pirates descend into the depths of the water. After the battle, Roderick is informed of damage done to the ship, forcing the crew to make a stop at a small island. Shirka senses some weirdness on the island, while Guts' brand bleeds. Isidro aims to inspect a dark cave, but a small girl claims it is not a good idea because a sea god lives there. The main crew inspects the village and eventually finds a statue of an ancient god. The mysterious girl takes Isidro to her house and places some medicine on his injury. The girl introduces herself as Isma and invites Isidro for dinner. Guts notices some strange happenings inside the restaurant they are in, and Shirka finds tentacle monsters inside the cave Isidro and Isma were exploring earlier. While Isidro embellishes his own tales to Isma, Shirka drops by to return his dagger. Upon looking at Isma, Shirka senses something mysterious about the girl that involves the water. Isma explains that she's the village outcast because she's a Mero, otherwise known as a mermaid. Isma asserts that she was just joking, but explains that her father was with one at one point, and on his deathbed, he said Isma's mom would come back to her. Isma tells a tale in which mermaids opposed the sea god and trapped him on this island. However, on full moons, it uses its large tentacles to wreck ships and fishermen. After dinner, Roderick leaves the restaurant to be greeted by the strange townsfolk. The chef-like monster says, "It's the Easter of the sea god, the lord of this island." Guts slashes the monster and walks outside for another battle. Shirka senses the commotion and heads towards Guts with Isidro and Isma. Guts, Serpico, and Roderick fend off the monsters until they come up against sea slugs. Isma notices a ship climbing the jagged cliffside. Guts continues slaughtering the sea monsters until the pirate ship barges in on the affair. Bonebeard re-ingratiates himself by parking his ship on land. "This ship will devour you, and you will be brethren of the sea, just like us." Bonebeard aims to turn Guts' crew into tentacles like the townsfolk. Shirka urges Guts to wait till she's there before he unleashes the Beast of Darkness. But Guts can't contain the malevolent energy anymore. The Black Swordsman slashes, gashes, and splits everything open in sight. A pair of children tentacles come towards Isma, but Isidro and Shirka take them down. Afterwards, Shirka sends out her luminous body in an attempt to possess Guts, like the time they did at Virtanis Harbor. Unfortunately, she cannot get through because the armor is emitting a strong OD, or Odek force, which can be viewed as one's life force, similar to the Hindu prana. Guts loses control of his self as he chomps down on the dead monster remains. Casca runs away from the group to save a child. As Guts ferociously approaches the two, someone urges him to yield and focus his gaze on Casca. The luminous moonlight child touches Guts, which buys him time to fight the inner beast of darkness. Shirka jumps on Guts' back and yanks the berserker hood from his face. Afterwards, Guts notices Casca touching the moonlight boy. Guts wants to settle things with the pirates, though, before departing, so they go to the ship to formulate a plan. To guard the ship, Shirka asks Farnese to cast the Formation of the Four, but the apprentice is skeptical of her abilities. Despite this, she accepts her role as the key defender of the ship. Farnese calls forth the kings of the East, West, South, and North, thus receiving the praise of Serpico and Guts. Shirka climbs on Guts' back as they allow the Beast of Darkness to envelop both of them. With Shirka's help, Guts seems to be in his proper state of mind. Guts and Shirka enter the cave of the sea god and come across a cavalcade of monsters. "Come into my house!" Bonebeard introduces the two to the massive sea god. Shirka implores Guts to retreat, but the Black Swordsman plans on jumping inside the monster's mouth. Guts dodges the multitude of sea monsters and leaps into the sea god's mouth, much to the delight of Bonebeard. Guts and Shirka plan to make their way to the sea god's heart by following the thumping sound. Roderick opens fire on Bonebeard, but the monstrous pirate seems unconcerned. Bonebeard eventually rams his way onto the seahorse and looks ready to take no prisoners. Isidro resists the scare tactics and leads the charge against the swashbuckling pirates. Guts brawls with parasitic sea creatures until he slices a hole into the sea god's stomach lining. Everyone does their part to defend the seahorse as Isidro battles Bonebeard, mano a mano. The pirates don't back down, at least not until Isidro throws an explosive into one of the monsters, forcing the pirates to flee once again. Guts reaches the heart, and the sound alone is sending shockwaves through his entire body. The Moonlight Boy points to the cliffs as the sea god bursts through the rock wall. The sea god's tentacles pervade the whole area as Guts fights eel-like monsters from within. Guts eventually lunges for the heart, but he is pushed back with an enormous beat. A wave knocks Isidro off of the boat, while Isma dives in to save him. Isma grabs Isidro and is implored to chant her real name by a mysterious voice. Upon doing so, Isma transforms into a mermaid. With her new powers, Isma brings Isidro back to the seahorse, as Roderick orders all hands on deck. Just then, Roderick and the shipmates notice a school of mermaids swimming beneath them. Guts continues fighting, but the sea god's heartbeat is causing him excruciating pain. Isma heads for the other mermaids, as Isidro instructs Roderick to get within firing range of the sea god. The seahorse commences bombardment. Isma races past the monster, but soon gets surrounded. A mermaid grabs her hand to save her, and it just so happens to be her own mother. Guts is currently deaf and blind from the massive heartbeats inside the whale. But with all the monsters out of the way, all Guts needs to do is pierce the heart. The next beat, however, knocks Guts down, paralyzing his body in the process. The mermaids sing in unison to inflict pain upon the sea god. Furthermore, the singing has concealed the loud heartbeats, opening up an opportunity for Guts. Get up and pierce some flesh and bone. Let me feel the pain. Guts hobbles to the heart, raises his massive dragon slayer, and cuts through the vital organ. Blood spurts everywhere as the god collapses below the surface. Unfortunately, after he sliced the heart, Guts was engulfed by blood, displacing Shirka's luminous body. Isma's mom offers to find Guts as the Black Swordsman suffers in the darkness. With blood everywhere, Guts wonders, is this how it ends? The Moonlight Boy shows Guts the way out. Guts pierces through a layer that leads to the seawater, as the mermaids grab his weary body and pull him to safety. The mermaids aid the seahorse in finding Elf Island, as Shirka and Farnese tend to Guts. Casca stirs awake and frantically searches for the Moonlight Boy. Everyone helps in the search for the mysterious boy, but to no avail. Shirka contemplates the idea of the boy being a manifestation of King Hanafubuku of Elfhelm. As they approach the island, Skull Knight's words from before race through Guts' mind, as he also contemplates the end result of their journey. Looking out the window, Guts sees what looks like branches in the moonlight. Off in the distance, the Moonlight Boy merely stares in silence, before eventually disappearing through the tree branches itself. Meanwhile, in a caravan, Rickert and Erica fight off trolls with various weapons. Things look grim until arrows pierce the trolls, and the Band of the Hawk rides in to finish them off. A cockatrice bellows loudly, but Irvine's arrows pierce its eye. The beast fights back, but Irvine transforms and strikes the cockatrice down with an arrow through the mouth. Rickert contemplates the changes in Griffith and the world, ever since he saw him on the Hill of Swords. Rickert kills some harpies and shows Laban his Band of the Hawk insignia. Laban then escorts Rickert and Erica to Falconia, leaving the two absolutely speechless. After introducing the two to the city, Laban gives Rickert a parcel that grants him an audience with the Hawk. Yet, Rickert wonders what he'll do in the presence of Griffith. Luca is now running a lodging business and decides to take Erica to a bathhouse for relaxation. The next day, Rickert meets Owen at Griffith's castle. They walk into a funeral service where Griffith summons the spirits of the deceased to say their final farewells to their family members. Locus arrives and tells Rickert that death is not the end, which means heaven and hell might also exist. Locus borrows Rickert for a moment to show him another side of the Hawk of Light. Locus deduces that Rickert wishes to inquire about the eclipse that transformed Griffith. But just then, they enter an arena where war demons are fighting, like a scene out of hell. Locus claims that Griffith has given everyone a place in his kingdom, which makes them all feel satisfied. Hence, it's a veritable utopia. During tea time, the Pontiff says he has 2 wishes before he dies: to preside over Griffith and Charlotte's wedding, and place the crown on Griffith's head. Locus brings Rickert to Griffith as the young boy contemplates what he'll do next. Will you still dream the same dream? Have you found an answer to the question on the Hill of Swords? Rickert slaps the leader / future king of Falconia, in what can only be described as the most epic moment in the Berserk pantheon. Sorry, Guts. Rickert thusly claims, "I'm Rickert, member of the Band of the Hawk, led by Griffith the White Hawk. My leader is not the Hawk of Light. Goodbye." Griffith plays off the event, but Locus is seething in rage. Luca tells Rickert that craftsmen are in high demand, given his skill set. But Rickert claims he can't stay because he slapped Griffith. Rickert admires the industrious spirit in Falconia and is reminded of his days with the Hawk. As the sun sets, Roxas stares down at Rickert before slithering down expeditiously. Die now, free of concern. Salat and the Bakiraka protect Rickert, thinking he knows some secret about the Hawk. The Bakiraka attack in unison, yet Roxas stymies them with ease. Salat lunges in and splits Roxas' mask in half. That's not necessarily where my head is. Roxas leaves, but says he'll return when the moon has risen. Rickert offers a proposition in exchange for the information he has on Griffith. Rickert returns to Lucca with Salat, and henceforth decides to leave Falconia, to live with Salat in a secret Bakiraka fortress. In the cover of night, Roxas sneaks through the streets, but is spotted and shot by Rickert. Rickert continues shooting while Salat slashes Roxas' face with a small blade. The Bakiraka blast Roxas with a modified flamethrower. As the flames incinerate him, Roxas takes a horse, splits it in half over his head to douse out the fire with blood. He then grabs Erica. Fire not out yet. It burns. Extinguish. A snake coils around Roxas as Daiba catches Erica. Daiba calls upon snakes and rats to attack Roxas. He also calls several Garuda so they can escape the city walls. Roxas transforms into his apostle form and flies towards Rickert and the others. Rickert loads a small cannon, blasting Roxas out of the air. Rickert looks over his shoulder as Griffith watches on silently. Guts and the crew reach Skellig Island, i.e. Fairy Hometown. Before departing, Isma's mom tells everyone that time flows differently here. Shirka indirectly references the PCAF story from the Lost Children chapter, mentioning how decades can pass by in short periods of time on Elfhelm. The crew walks on and encounters a mysterious graveyard, but Shirka claims it's a barrier to keep people out. Witches watch the crew in secret as Guts encounters magical scarecrows. Guts, Isidro, and Serpico take the scarecrows down, or so they thought. Shirka explodes their heads with magic and mentions how the scarecrows were put under a spell that she manipulated. A flaming scarecrow boss emerges forth from a witch named Morda. Guts launches his cannon and easily cuts the magical beast down. The mages come out of hiding as rain descends upon the fires. Gedfring, the one who governs the mages, takes Guts and the crew to their village. Shirka mentions how they're here to restore Casca's sanity, and one of the witches claims that the Flower Storm Monarch has a method of going deep inside one's mind. They eventually reach the village and see numerous mages honing their magical skills. Gedfring takes the crew to the Great Gurus, and Guts asks where the Flower Storm Monarch is. The Gurus urge patience, and Gedfring talks about the World Tree and how it connects heaven, the earth, and the underworld. The mages ask Guts about the Hawk, and Guts says that Griffith wants his own kingdom. However, that is only one step, as he will continue to soar ever higher. Gedfring leads the crew through the magical forest. Danin, one of the female mages, blows a horn to get everyone's attention. Danin then escorts them into the tree and undergoes a magical transformation. Welcome to Elfhelm, travelers. It turns out that Danin is the Flower Storm Monarch, or what I referred to earlier as King Hanafubuku. Now just for some clarification, in the original Japanese text, King was written with gender-neutral kanji, which literally translates to ruler, which can either be a king or queen. And from 2018 onwards, reprints simply refer to her as the Flower Storm Monarch and not King Hanafubuku. Danin claims that if they use the Corridor of Dreams, they can restore Casca's mental state. Danin takes the two witches, Shirka and Farnese, with Casca to the magic mushroom bed to perform the ritual. Upon falling asleep, Shirka and Farnese exit their own dreams to enter deep within Casca's psyche. Deeper than that. The girls enter a wasteland and encounter an emaciated dog dragging a casket. The dog is attacked by shadowy spirits. Farnese and Shirka drive them off, as the young witch deduces the dog to be Guts, or to be clear, the guts that exist within Casca's psyche. The The girls open the casket, only to see the shattered remains of Casca's ego consciousness. Inside the broken doll, a small, elf-like spirit of Casca dwells, which represents her true self. As Guts and the crew enjoy the nightlife, the Black Swordsman thanks everyone for everything they've done. Likewise, Serpco thanks Guts for breathing life into Lady Farnese. Inside Casca's mind, Shirka and Farnese encounter memory fragments from Casca's past, which restores a piece of the broken doll. They continue confronting more and more moments from Casca's days with the Band of the Hawk. Each restored piece of the doll brings the two closer to the eclipse in the distance. Shirka fends off some bug-like demon children via summoning the Rotting Root Lord and the Wheel of Flame. Farnese summons a Mozgus head to protect them from two phallic monsters. They reach the final fragment, housed in a giant egg. The large caliginous bird sweeps by the two, serving as a guardian to the final fragment. The miasma transforms into a cavalcade of grotesque monsters. Struggling to protect the coffin, the Guts-like dog dons the Berserker armor and races into the fray. The Berserker dog fires a cannon blast at the dark bird, but to no avail. Out of options and overwhelmed by adversaries, Flora emerges from Shirka's hat, incinerating all monsters in sight. Shirka and Farnese reach the egg, confronting the demon child and the fateful eclipse from 4 years ago. They find Casca's heart coded in an anathema, or a curse, to protect her from the horrible memories. The Guts dog defends against the bird long enough for the two witches to place Casca's heart into the doll, restoring Casca's psyche to what it once was. It's good to meet you, Farnese, Shirka, Ivalera. Thank you for taking care of me as Elaine for so long. Casca informs the two that she was dreaming through Elaine, vaguely watching from a distance all these years. Do you remember Guts? Danan bestows Casca with a gift, which looks like a floral, elf-like garb. Casca then walks towards the Black Swordsman. But for now, it was still too soon to see him. Griffith leads the Band of the Hawk against troll-like monsters. Zod swipes at the Hydra and bites down on its head. Griffith leaps from his horse and drives his sword through the leader's eye. After slaying the Jotnor, Griffith instructs the Band of the Hawk to finish off the remaining monsters. Griffith leads his forces through a corridor of stone pillars onto the branches of the World Spiral Tree, which takes them back to Falconia. In a meeting with the Falconia elite, Locust lists the military victories of the Band of the Hawk. However, Owen and the others talk about a precipitating civil war, stemming from poor pay and the intermixing of different cultures in one place. Charlotte also proposes an initiative to found an orphanage, but is shot down by the council due to the cost. In order for us to survive, we must prosper. Griffith proposes that they should support the children of Falconia to the age of 10, enlist disenfranchised immigrants in the army as a pathway to citizenship, and build a wall for security measures. Griffith aims to expand his kingdom across the entire continent, just like King Gaiseric from 1,000 years ago. Griffith exalts Charlotte's proposal, much to the chagrin of Sonia. Griffith rewards Charlotte for her dedicated work, as the hawk stares at black strands in his hairline. Of course. Then this night will be. Griffith mysteriously vanishes from the bedroom under the full moon. Danan gives Casca a haircut, as the female swordsman looks like her old self again. Casca thanks Farnese and Shirka for all their work. Then she practices her swordplay with some Viking golems, and impresses everyone. As Isidro and Casca spar, Farnese and Shirka visit Guts, and asks if he wants to see his past lover. Guts declines, yet Casca walks over nevertheless. Casca compares Isidro's fighting style to judo, which reminds her of the dreadful eclipse, causing her to clutch her heart and collapse to the ground. Guts solemnly walks away as the Skull Knight watches on. Casca can't see or hear Guts without experiencing a traumatic shock. She then proceeds to rest. Shirka and Farnese attend a mage class held by Gedfring. The two display their skills to the surprise of the younger mages. Gedfring inquires Shirka if she would be interested in summoning daemons, which includes her past master, Flora. By himself, Guts swings his sword on a cliff as he's approached by a familiar friend. You bear witness to the end of your journey. It is not always a happy thing. Oh, it's you, as dictated by causality. Gedfring greets Skull Knight by calling him Your Majesty. He then suggests that they go to visit the dwarf spirit named Hanar, a man who constructed Guts' berserker armor and Skull Knight's battlesuit. Morda assists Shirka in flying with a broom for the first time. As they glide around the island, they see Guts and Skull Knight heading into a ravine where the island's outcast reside. As they enter the cave, they meet Granny Volvapa, Morda's master, who specializes in manipulating departed souls. She directs the two to the stone forest to catch up to Guts and Skull Knight. Hanar is a grumpy blacksmith who warns Guts that the berserker armor is liable to possess its host if it is not mastered. Hanar swings a sledgehammer at Guts' abdomen, which elicits an immediate reaction in Guts, precipitating a blood memory from its previous owner, which caused his life to be consumed by the armor. Guts sees Void, along with 4 other unknown God Hand members. Guts looks in his left arm to see a mysterious girl reach out for his face, just after being branded by the invocation of doom. In desperation, Shirka pulls the mask from Guts' exasperated face as he utters, "That right now was for sure the end. What you bore witness to was the end of a foolish king and the beginning of a dead man stalking the endless night." Skull Knight visits his beloved in her eternal slumber. Donan refers to his beloved as the Lady Priestess of Cherry Blossoms. Guts notices that Donan and Skull Knight's beloved looked remarkably similar to one another. Shirka asks Gedfring about his master and Skull Knight's connection, and he claims that Flora's feelings were too strong in the past, causing her to violate a taboo and be exiled from the island. Meanwhile, Isidro is clowning the young mages via throwing elves at them and making all sorts of weird faces. Eventually, Isma's Kelpie swallows the rambunctious hellstorm of a kid and puts an end to all his nonsense. Under the full moon, Gedfring tells Guts that Skull Knight is motivated by one purpose: rage. He tells Guts he'll need to reconcile his own fury, whether it keeps him alive or destroys him. Guts swings his sword in a frustrated manner. Just then, the wind blows. Flower petals descend from trees, and a cryptic, shadowy figure approaches Guts. And it is none other than the Moonlight Boy. And this officially concludes the Berserk timeline video. At the moment, there is no information regarding the release of Chapter 364, so the ongoing epic is on hold at the moment. And if this is your first time hearing the Berserk tale, and you are wondering how quickly Kentaro Miura puts out the chapters, yeah, it's painfully slow, at least in recent years according to this graph. We got 3 chapters last year, but only 2 in 2019. Now, if you're wondering why there was a drop-off, one of the reasons is due to the fact that Miura has released a new manga called Doranki, which came out in 2019, which is a fun manga in and of itself, but after releasing 6 chapters, it is also on an extended break. So as we wait for the next chapter and wonder when the end is coming for Berserk, we have only Miura's interviews to reference to. And in this regard, Miura has contradicted himself numerous times. But given the various clues in the manga and some recent interview remarks, it would seem the final conclusion is imminent. When and how that happens is anyone's guess. But perhaps like Guts, we are all strugglers and waiting to see how this manga officially wraps up.